Welcome back to my channel Sleep Beneath History, my friend. Tonight, we are going to take a slow journey into one of the longest and most complicated wars of 17th century Europe. It was called the 30 Years' War. The name sounds simple. 30 years. But behind those words was a long period of change. There were kings and princes. There were farmers and merchants. There were soldiers and priests. There were small villages. There were great cities. And there were ordinary people who often had little idea why armies were passing through their homes. So tonight, there is no need to hurry. You can simply relax. Let your surroundings become quiet. And as you listen, imagine the roads and fields of Europe many centuries ago. Imagine the soft light of a small candle. Imagine the sound of wooden wheels moving slowly along a muddy road. Imagine church bells somewhere in the distance. And imagine a world before modern trains, before telephones, before electric lights. A world where news moved at the speed of a horse. A world where a message from one city could take days to reach another. And where a decision made inside a distant palace could eventually change the life of someone living in a small village. Tonight, we will begin before the war itself. We will begin with the world that existed before the first major battles. Because wars rarely appear from nowhere. They usually grow slowly. They begin with arguments, with fears, with old memories, with political disagreements, with religious differences, and sometimes with people who believe that they are protecting something important. So let us go back, slowly, quietly, to Europe in the early years of the 17th century. The year is around 1600. Europe is changing. The Middle Ages are already far behind. The Renaissance has transformed art, learning, and culture. New ideas are moving through cities. Books are being printed in large numbers. Merchants are traveling farther than before. Ships are crossing oceans. New lands are being explored. Powerful kingdoms are growing. And yet, despite all this change, much of Europe still feels very old. Most people live in the countryside. They work with their hands. They grow grain. They keep animals. They cut wood. They make cloth. They repair tools. They carry water. They bake bread. Life follows the seasons. Spring brings planting. Summer brings long days in the fields. Autumn brings harvest. Winter brings darkness and cold. For many people, the world is small. A person may be born in one village, live there most of their life, marry someone from a nearby village, work the same fields that their parents worked, and perhaps never travel farther than the nearest market town. The great political world is far away. Kings may be known by name. Princes may appear on coins. Emperors may be spoken about during church services. But for an ordinary farmer, daily life is mostly about the weather, the harvest, the price of grain, the health of the family, the condition of the animals, and the next meal. This is important to remember. When we speak about the 30 Years' War, we often speak about rulers. We speak about armies. We speak about treaties. We speak about religion and politics. But beneath all of those things were millions of ordinary people. People who simply wanted to live. People who wanted to wake in the morning, work their land, eat their food, see their children grow, and sleep safely at night. As we begin this journey, keep those people in mind. They are the quiet background of the entire story. Now let us travel toward the center of Europe. There we find a large and complicated political world. It was called the Holy Roman Empire. The name can sound strange to us. It was neither a simple empire like the Roman Empire of ancient times, nor a single unified country like a modern nation. Instead, it was a large collection of territories. There were duchies, there were counties, there were free cities, there were bishoprics, there were kingdoms, there were lands ruled by princes. Some territories were large, others were very small. A ruler might control only a few towns and villages. Another might control a much larger region. There was no single capital that controlled everything. Instead, power was spread across many places. Imagine looking at a map. Instead of seeing one large country in the middle of Europe, you would see hundreds of different territories. Their borders could be complicated. A road might pass from one territory into another. A village might belong to one ruler. A nearby town might belong to someone else. And each ruler had different interests. Some were powerful. Some were weak. Some were Catholic. Some were Protestant. Some were interested mainly in local matters. Others dreamed of gaining greater influence. And above this complicated collection of territories stood the emperor. The emperor was important, but his power was not absolute. The emperor needed cooperation from many princes and other powerful people. And this created a delicate political balance. For many years, that balance managed to survive. Not perfectly. There were arguments. There were smaller conflicts. There were political disagreements. But Europe had not yet entered the long war that would eventually reshape much of the continent. To understand why that changed, we need to look at religion. So let us slow down here. This part of the story matters. About a century earlier, a German monk named Martin Luther had challenged important teachings and practices of the Catholic Church. His ideas spread quickly. The Protestant Reformation changed Europe. Some rulers supported Protestant ideas. Some communities became Lutheran. Other areas followed different forms of Protestant Christianity. The Catholic Church responded with its own reforms. Over time, Europe became divided between different Christian traditions. But religion was not only about private belief. In this period, religion and government were deeply connected. A ruler's religion could influence the religion of the territory. Churches owned land. Religious institutions had political power. Princes could gain or lose influence depending on their religious alliances. And ordinary people often lived within systems where religion shaped almost every part of daily life. The calendar was religious. Many holidays were religious. Marriage was connected to religion. Burial was connected to religion. Education was often connected to religion. Church bells marked the rhythm of the day. So religious disagreements could become political disagreements. And political disagreements could become religious disagreements. The two were often difficult to separate. Imagine living in a small German town around the year 1600. You wake early. Perhaps the morning is cold. You hear bells. You walk through narrow streets. You pass a bakery. You see smoke rising from chimneys. You know which church your family attends. You know which religious traditions your neighbors follow. And you know that the ruler of your territory has a particular religious position. Perhaps everything feels normal. Perhaps peaceful. But beneath the surface, there are questions. Who should control the churches? Which religious practices are allowed? Who has the right to decide? Can a ruler change the religion of a territory? What happens when neighboring rulers follow different faiths? These questions may not matter much on an ordinary morning, but they can become very important when political power is involved. And by the early 17th century, The religious divisions of Central Europe were becoming harder to manage. There had been agreements. One important agreement was the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. It had attempted to create a way for Catholic and Lutheran rulers to coexist. It gave certain rulers the ability to choose between Catholicism and Lutheranism for their territories. It helped reduce some conflicts, but it did not solve every problem. Other Protestant groups were not fully included, and the political world continued to change. New generations of rulers came to power. Old agreements were interpreted in different ways. Trust became weaker, and many people began to worry about the future. Let us imagine a quiet evening in one of these territories. The sun is going down. A farmer has finished his work. The animals are being brought inside. A woman is preparing a simple meal. Children are sitting near the warmth of the fire. Someone is repairing a piece of clothing. Someone else is sharpening a farming tool. Outside, the road is becoming dark. There is no great battle. There are no marching armies. There is only an ordinary evening. Yet far away, rulers are meeting. Letters are being written. Messengers are writing. Princes are discussing alliances. And slowly, the political atmosphere is changing. This is one of the strange things about history. A person living quietly in a village may have no idea that events are moving toward a great crisis. The future can feel completely invisible. For the people of Central Europe, another important concern was the rise of powerful families. One of the most important was the Habsburg family. The Habsburgs had become one of the strongest ruling families in Europe. They controlled important territories. They held the imperial title. They also ruled lands outside the Holy Roman Empire. The Habsburg world stretched across Central Europe. Among their territories were the Kingdom of Bohemia and the lands connected with the Austrian Habsburgs. Bohemia was especially important. Its capital was Prague. Prague was a beautiful and important city. It had churches, palaces, markets, bridges, workshops, narrow streets, and a mixture of languages, traditions, and religious communities. It was also a center of political power. And this is where our story will slowly begin to move. Because Bohemia would become one of the places where the tension finally broke. But before we arrive there, let us stay for a moment in Prague. Imagine walking through the city in the early 17th century. The streets are not smooth. They are made of earth and stone. In wet weather, they become muddy. People move carefully. Horses pull carts. Merchants carry goods. Craft workers open their workshops. A bell rings somewhere nearby. The smell of bread comes from a bakery. Another street may smell of smoke from a fireplace. The buildings rise close together. Some are painted in bright colors. Others are plain. There are churches and public buildings. There are houses belonging to wealthy families. And there are smaller homes where ordinary workers live. Prague is alive, but it is also divided. Different religious groups have different hopes. Different political groups have different ideas about authority. The Bohemian estates have important rights. The Habsburg rulers want strong control. Protestant nobles fear that Catholic influence is growing. Catholic leaders want to strengthen their position. And everyone is watching everyone else. This does not mean that people are constantly fighting. Most days are ordinary. Markets open. Bread is baked. Children play. People marry. People work. People pray. People complain about prices. People worry about winter. Life continues. But politics is becoming tense. The new century begins, and Europe is still holding together. For a little while longer. Now let us move toward the year 1617. A new ruler is becoming important in the Habsburg world. His name is Ferdinand. Ferdinand was a strong Catholic. He believed deeply in his faith. He also believed that Catholicism should have a stronger position in the territories he ruled. For Protestant nobles in Bohemia, this was worrying. They feared that their religious rights might be reduced. They feared that the balance of power was changing. They had reasons to be concerned. Religious buildings became part of the argument. There were disputes about Protestant worship. There were questions about who had the right to build churches. There were arguments about whether certain lands belonged to Catholic or Protestant communities. These disputes may sound small. A building here, a piece of land there, a legal document, a local decision. But in a tense political world, small disputes can become symbols of much larger fears. And so the people of Bohemia watched carefully. The year 1618 approached. The winter passed. Spring arrived. The fields began to change. Trees became green. Farmers returned to their work. Markets became busier. The days became longer. And in Prague, political arguments became sharper. Then came May. On a day in May 1618, a group of Protestant nobles entered Prague Castle. They were angry. They wanted answers. They wanted to defend what they believed were their rights. Their meeting became one of the most famous moments in the history of the 30 Years' War. The men confronted two Catholic officials and a secretary. The argument grew intense. And then something remarkable happened. The officials were thrown from a window. This event became known as the defenestration of Prague. The word sounds complicated. It simply means throwing someone out of a window. The men fell from a considerable height. Yet they survived. There are different stories about exactly why they survived. One story says that they landed in a pile of manure. Another explanation is that the slope below the window helped soften their fall. Whatever the reason, they survived. But the political consequences were much more serious. The event became a symbol. The dispute in Bohemia had moved beyond arguments. The crisis had become an open rebellion. And now Europe was entering a new chapter. But even here, we should slow down. Because the people living in Prague that morning did not suddenly know that a 30-year war had begun. They did not have a newspaper announcing the future. They did not know how long the conflict would last. They did not know how many armies would cross the countryside. They did not know how many rulers would become involved. They did not know that the conflict would spread far beyond Bohemia. They simply knew that something serious had happened. A window, a fall, a political argument, and a growing sense that the old balance was beginning to break. As evening came, Prague continued to live. People returned home. Meals were prepared. Candles were lit. Doors were closed. Children were put to bed. Perhaps some people talked quietly about what had happened. Perhaps others were afraid. Perhaps some believed they had defended their rights. Others may have feared that the situation would become worse. The city slept, but the political world did not. Messages began moving. Letters traveled from Prague to other courts. Rulers learned what had happened. Officials discussed their response. Alliances began to matter. And slowly the conflict widened. The Bohemian rebels did not simply want to protest. They began building their own political and military position. They rejected Ferdinand as their king. They eventually chose another ruler. That ruler was Frederick V, Elector Palatine. He was a Protestant prince. His acceptance of the Bohemian crown was a major political decision, and it would give him a nickname that would follow him through history: the Winter King. He would not rule for long, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let us return to the quieter world around him. Imagine a farmer in Bohemia. The fields stretch across the countryside. There are wheat fields. There are barley fields. There are meadows. There are forests. Small villages sit between them. Houses are made from wood, stone, and plaster. Roofs are covered with thatch or tiles, depending on the region and wealth of the household. A family wakes early. The father prepares tools. The mother prepares food. Children help with simple tasks. Animals need attention. The day begins before the sun is high. For these people, political arguments may seem distant, but politics can eventually reach the farm. A soldier needs food. An army needs horses. A government needs money. A road becomes important when troops need to travel. A village may be asked to provide supplies. And so the great world and the small world begin to touch. This is one of the central ideas of our journey. The 30 Years' War was fought by rulers and armies, but it was lived by ordinary people. The war would eventually reach farms, markets, roads, churches, homes, and quiet villages. Yet none of that had happened fully in 1618. The future was still open. There were still possibilities. Perhaps the rebellion could have ended quickly. Perhaps a settlement could have been reached. Perhaps the rulers could have stepped back. Perhaps Europe could have returned to peace. History often contains these moments. Moments when the future has not yet been decided. The people living through them cannot see all the paths ahead. They only see the next day. And perhaps that is how we should see this story too. One day at a time. One road at a time. One letter at a time. One quiet evening at a time. The rebellion in Bohemia now needed support. The Habsburg rulers needed to respond. Other Protestant rulers had to decide what they would do. Catholic rulers had their own interests. Spain was connected to the Habsburg family. The German princes watched carefully. The Dutch were fighting their own long struggle against Spain. Denmark and Sweden would later become involved. France would eventually enter the conflict. But none of this was certain yet. The war had not become the great European conflict we remember. It was still growing, slowly, like a small fire in dry grass. At first, it could perhaps be contained, but every new political decision added another piece of fuel. The Habsburg rulers were determined to restore their authority in Bohemia. The rebels were determined to defend their position. Both sides believed they had important rights. Both sides believed they were protecting something valuable. And when people believe that compromise means surrender, peaceful solutions become harder. The months that followed brought more preparation. Armies were gathered. Money was needed. Commanders were chosen. Diplomats traveled. Letters crossed Europe. And somewhere beneath all this movement, ordinary life continued. Bread still had to be baked. Crops still had to be planted. Animals still had to be fed. Clothes still had to be washed. Children still had to be cared for. The sun still rose over the fields. The seasons still changed. The world had not stopped. And perhaps tonight, as you listen, you can imagine one of those ordinary evenings. The sun is low. The fields are quiet. A farmer walks home along a narrow path. There is a soft wind. The trees move gently. Smoke rises from distant chimneys. A bell sounds from a village church. Inside a small house, a simple meal is waiting. There is bread, perhaps some porridge, perhaps cabbage or beans, perhaps a little meat if the family can afford it. The family sits together. They talk about the weather. They talk about work. They talk about neighbors. And perhaps someone mentions the political trouble. But then the conversation moves back to ordinary things. Tomorrow there will be work. Tomorrow the animals will need feeding. Tomorrow the fields will need attention. The great conflict is approaching. But tonight the family sleeps. And outside the road remains dark. The first chapter of our journey is therefore not really about battle. It is about a world becoming uncertain. It is about religion. It is about rulers. It is about old agreements. It is about fear. And it is about a political system that was becoming harder to hold together. The 30 Years' War did not begin because one person woke up one morning and decided that Europe should suffer for 30 years. It grew from many decisions, many arguments, many fears, many alliances, and many moments when people chose one path instead of another. The window at Prague was one of those moments. A small physical act, but a large political meaning. From that window, the story would begin to spread. Soon armies would move. Soon kings and princes would enter the story. Soon the countryside would feel the weight of the conflict. But for now, let us remain in this quiet moment. The year is 1618. The fields are green. The roads are dusty. The churches are ringing their bells. The markets are open. The people are working. And Europe is standing at the edge of something it cannot yet see. As the night grows quiet, let us leave Prague for a little while. Let us follow the road into the countryside. Let us listen to the soft sounds of a village settling down. A door closes. A horse moves inside its stable. A wooden cart rests beside a house. A candle burns behind a small window. The sky grows darker. And far away, in rooms filled with maps and letters, rulers are making decisions. The ordinary people sleep. The diplomats continue talking. The messengers continue writing. And the 30 Years' War is beginning to take shape. There is no need to hurry. There will be many years ahead. Many roads. Many cities. Many rulers. Many quiet evenings. And many ordinary people whose lives will be changed by events they never asked for. For tonight we will stop here. At the beginning. Before the armies become enormous. Before the battlefield spread across Europe. Before the war becomes the long and exhausting conflict remembered by history. For now we have only the first signs. A divided Europe. A nervous Bohemia. A powerful Habsburg family. Religious disagreements. Political fears. And a window in Prague. Take a slow breath. Let the sounds of the 17th century become distant. The road is quiet now. The fields are dark. The last candlelight is fading. And somewhere in the distance, another church bell is ringing. The story will continue. And when we return, we will follow the Bohemian rebellion as it grows. We will meet the rulers who believed they could shape the future. We will see why Frederick V accepted the Bohemian crown. And we will slowly walk toward the first major confrontation of the war. Until then, let the night remain peaceful. And let history rest for a while. The road from Prague is quiet tonight. The city is slowly disappearing behind us. Its towers become smaller. Its walls fade into the darkness. And the sounds of the streets become softer. Imagine that you are walking along an old road in Bohemia. It is the year 1619. The air is cool. The fields are green and gold. A few clouds move slowly across the evening sky. There are farms beside the road. There are small villages in the distance. And somewhere beyond the hills, political decisions are being made that will soon affect the lives of thousands of people. The rebellion that began in Prague has grown. The Protestant nobles of Bohemia are no longer simply asking questions. They have rejected the authority of Ferdinand. They have chosen their own government. And now they need a king. This is where our story becomes connected to a man named Frederick. Frederick V was a young Protestant ruler from the German lands. He was the Elector Palatine. The title may sound grand, and it was important. The Palatinate was a significant territory along the Rhine River. Frederick came from a powerful family. He was married to Elizabeth Stuart. She was the daughter of King James I of England and Scotland. So Frederick was connected to one of the most famous royal families in Europe. Elizabeth was young, intelligent, well-educated, and already accustomed to the world of courts and politics. Her father was King James. Her family had connections across Europe. Her marriage to Frederick had been carefully arranged. It was more than a private family matter. Royal marriages often connected political interests. They could create friendships between rulers. They could strengthen alliances. They could increase influence. And sometimes they could create expectations. Frederick and Elizabeth had married in 1613. At first, their life together was centered in the Palatinate. There were palaces, gardens, servants, court ceremonies, music, religious services, letters, guests, and the ordinary routines of noble life. But the world around them was changing. The Protestant rebellion in Bohemia created a difficult choice. Should Frederick accept the crown, or should he refuse? The answer was not simple. If he accepted, he would be challenging the Habsburgs. That was dangerous. The Habsburg family was powerful. Its members controlled large territories. They had money. They had soldiers. They had important allies. And Ferdinand was determined to regain control. But Frederick also had reasons to accept. The Bohemian rebels were Protestant. Frederick was Protestant. Many Protestant nobles believed that he could protect their interests. His connection to England also gave some people hope. Perhaps England would support him. Perhaps other Protestant rulers would join him. Perhaps the Habsburgs could be stopped. Perhaps the conflict could be contained. These hopes were important. But hope is not the same as certainty. And Frederick was about to discover that. Imagine him sitting in a quiet room. A letter has arrived. He reads it slowly. The words describe the political situation in Bohemia. The crown is being offered. The decision is waiting. Outside, the evening is calm. Servants move quietly through the building. Candles burn beside the windows. A fire gives warmth. But inside Frederick's mind, there are difficult questions. If he says yes, he may gain a crown. If he says yes, he may also lose his lands. He could anger the emperor. He could create a wider war. He could put his family in danger. If he says no, the Bohemian rebels may feel abandoned. The Protestant cause may lose an important opportunity. And another ruler could take the crown. There is no easy answer. Frederick eventually chose to accept. In 1619, he became King of Bohemia. It was a remarkable decision. A prince from the Palatinate was now claiming the crown of one of the most important kingdoms in Central Europe. His wife Elizabeth would become queen, and together they traveled toward Prague. For a moment, it may have felt like the beginning of a great royal adventure. Imagine the journey. A royal party moving along the roads. Horses, carriages, servants, guards, clothing packed into trunks, letters carried by messengers, food prepared along the way. The landscape slowly changes. Villages pass by. Fields stretch toward the horizon. Church towers rise above small towns. The journey takes time. There are no modern roads. There are no fast trains. There are no cars. Everything moves at the speed of horses. When Frederick and Elizabeth finally arrived in Prague, they entered a city full of expectation. The people who had invited Frederick hoped that he would become a strong Protestant king. The political leaders hoped that his presence would strengthen their rebellion. But Frederick had another problem. He was new to the kingdom. He did not know all its customs. He did not know every political figure. He did not understand every local disagreement. And he had arrived in a situation already filled with tension. The palace was busy. Visitors came and went. Officials brought documents. Religious leaders discussed their plans. Nobles debated politics. Messengers carried news from other territories. Elizabeth had her own role. She was now queen. She was young. She had entered a world very different from the one she had known in England. The court in Prague was impressive, but it was also uncertain. There were questions about money, questions about religion, questions about military defense, questions about foreign support, and most importantly, there was the question of Ferdinand. Ferdinand had not accepted Frederick's claim. He considered Bohemia his rightful possession. He intended to recover it. And he had powerful supporters. One of them was the Catholic League. The Catholic League was a group of Catholic territories and rulers that could provide military support. Its most important commander was Johann Circles, Count of Tilly. Tilly was an experienced soldier. He was disciplined. He was respected. And he would become one of the most important military figures of the early war. Another powerful figure was Maximilian of Bavaria. Maximilian was a strong Catholic ruler. He wanted to strengthen his own position. He also wanted to protect Catholic interests. The political situation was becoming more complicated. Frederick had the Bohemian crown. Ferdinand wanted it back. The Catholic League was preparing. The Protestant side needed allies. And Europe was watching. Still, daily life continued. In Prague, bakers still opened their shops. Craft workers still worked. Merchants still brought goods to market. Children still played in streets. People still went to church. People still prepared meals. The political crisis did not erase ordinary life. Instead, it slowly moved into the background of ordinary life. A conversation at a market might include rumors. A shopkeeper might hear that soldiers were being gathered. A farmer might hear that taxes were increasing. A family might wonder whether prices would rise. A messenger might arrive with news from another city. This is how distant political events often enter ordinary life. Not all at once, but little by little. A rumor, a letter, a new tax, a soldier on the road, a shortage of food, a change in the market. And then suddenly, the distant world no longer feels so distant. For Frederick, the greatest problem was military strength. A crown is only useful if a ruler can defend it. Frederick needed soldiers. He needed money. He needed supplies. He needed commanders. He needed allies. And he needed them quickly. but his position was weaker than it first appeared. The Protestant side was divided. Not every Protestant ruler wanted to risk a direct war with the Habsburgs. Some feared losing their own territories. Some wanted to avoid a larger conflict. Some were uncertain about Frederick. And some were simply waiting to see what happened. England was also not prepared to send a large army to defend Frederick. His father-in-law, King James, preferred diplomacy. James did not want a major war. He hoped that political pressure could solve the problem. But Ferdinand was preparing for force. The difference between the two approaches would become important. Frederick was now king, but he did not have the strength of a major empire behind him. The title was impressive. The reality was fragile. And so people began to whisper. Could Frederick really hold Bohemia? Could he defeat the Habsburg forces? Would his allies come? Would England help? Would the German Protestant princes help? Would the Dutch help? Nobody knew. The uncertainty grew. And then, as summer moved toward autumn, the armies began to gather. Let us leave the palace for a moment. Let us walk into the countryside. Imagine a village several days from Prague. The harvest is approaching. Farmers are working in the fields. Wheat is bending in the wind. The days are becoming shorter. At night the air is cooler. A man returns from the market. He has heard that soldiers are gathering. He tells his family. Perhaps they listen quietly. Perhaps they do not know what to believe. Someone says the army will pass nearby. Another says it will not. A third person says the war will end soon. This is how uncertainty feels. Nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. And yet dinner still has to be prepared. The animals still need food. The children still need to sleep. The work of life continues. In Prague, Frederick and Elizabeth are trying to establish their court. They hold ceremonies. They meet officials. They attend religious services. They receive visitors. Elizabeth's presence attracts attention. She is the daughter of an English king. She is young. She is becoming a symbol. To some Protestants, she represents hope. To others, she is a foreign princess entering a complicated political world. The couple also has to manage money. Royal courts are expensive. Food must be purchased. Servants must be paid. Buildings must be maintained. Officials need salaries. Ceremonies cost money. And a kingdom preparing for war needs even more. Frederick's financial position is not strong enough for the challenge ahead. Still, there are moments of beauty. Prague in this period is a city of art and architecture. The palace complex stands above the city. Church towers rise into the sky. The river flows beneath the bridges. At sunset, the buildings become golden. Imagine looking down from a high window. The city stretches beneath you. Smoke rises from chimneys. The river reflects the evening light. People move through the streets. And beyond the city are hills and fields. For a moment, the political problems may seem far away. But they are not. The Habsburg army is moving. The Catholic forces are gathering. And the Bohemian army is preparing to meet them. By autumn, the situation has become serious. Frederick needs a victory. A victory could strengthen his position. A defeat could destroy his new kingdom. The armies eventually move toward Prague. Among the commanders facing Frederick is Tilly. His forces include soldiers from the Catholic League. Imperial forces are also involved. The Bohemian side gathers its own troops. The armies are not simply collections of professional soldiers. There are many different kinds of men. Some are experienced. Some are young. Some have joined because they need money. Some are serving because their ruler ordered them to. Some are mercenaries. Some are local troops. Their clothing varies. Their languages vary. Their reasons for fighting vary. Imagine standing near an army camp. The evening is cold. Fires burn across the field. Soldiers prepare food. Horses are tied nearby. Wagons stand in rows. Officers discuss maps. Someone repairs a boot. Someone sharpens a piece of equipment. Someone writes a letter home. Someone sits quietly beside a fire. The great political conflict becomes very ordinary when seen at ground level. A soldier still gets hungry. A soldier still gets tired. A soldier still worries. A soldier still remembers home. And somewhere beyond the camp, farmers are wondering what will happen to their fields. The armies moved toward a place near Prague called White Mountain. The date was November 8, 1620. This would become one of the most important battles of the early 30 Years' War. The battle itself was not especially long. The forces supporting Ferdinand attacked the Bohemian army. The Bohemian position weakened. The Protestant forces were defeated, and Frederick's position collapsed. The dream of an independent Bohemian kingdom was ending. Frederick had been king for only a short time. His reign had lasted less than a year. This is why history would remember him as the Winter King. A king for one winter. The name sounds almost poetic, but the reality was painful. Frederick and Elizabeth had to leave Prague. They became fugitives. Their journey away from Bohemia was very different from their journey into it. They had entered as a royal couple. They left as defeated rulers. Imagine the road. The weather is cold. The sky is gray. The royal party is moving away from Prague. There is no celebration. No welcoming crowd. Only uncertainty. The couple does not know exactly where they will live. They have lost their kingdom. They will also face the loss of their lands in the Palatinate. The consequences of defeat are spreading. For Frederick, this is a personal disaster. For Elizabeth, it is the beginning of a life of exile. But for Europe, the story is only beginning. The victory at White Mountain strengthened Ferdinand. It showed that the Habsburgs could defeat the Bohemian rebellion. It strengthened Catholic power in the region. And it frightened Protestant rulers. The conflict was no longer simply a local disagreement. The political consequences were becoming wider. The defeated Bohemian rebels faced punishment. Some nobles lost their lands. Some were executed. Others were forced into exile. Religious changes followed. Catholic authority became stronger. The Protestant movement in Bohemia was badly weakened. For ordinary people, the change could be felt in many ways. Churches changed. Officials changed. Laws changed. Taxes changed. And new military demands appeared. The war was beginning to reshape society. Yet if you walked through a Bohemian village that winter, you might not immediately see the whole political story. You would see snow. You would see smoke. You would see people carrying firewood. You would see animals in barns. You would see small windows glowing with candlelight. You would see families trying to stay warm. The great battle had ended, but the lives of ordinary people continued. This is something we should remember as we move through the coming chapters. History books often place battles at the center, but between the battles are long stretches of ordinary life. People planted crops. They repaired houses. They married. They raised children. They attended church. They went to markets. They waited for news. and they tried to understand a world that seemed increasingly uncertain. Frederick's defeat also had another effect. His enemies became stronger. Maximilian of Bavaria gained power. The Catholic League had won an important victory. Ferdinand's authority increased, and the Habsburg position looked much stronger. But Protestant fears did not disappear. Instead, they grew. Other rulers began to wonder whether Ferdinand would now become too powerful. Would he continue expanding his authority? Would he change the balance of the empire? Would Protestant territories be threatened? These questions would help bring new powers into the conflict. And so the war would continue. The Bohemian phase was ending. Another phase was approaching. But tonight, let us remain for a moment with Frederick and Elizabeth. Imagine them traveling through the cold countryside. They have lost a crown. They have lost a kingdom. They do not know what the future holds. Yet their story will continue. Elizabeth will live for many years. She will become known by another name, the Queen of Hearts. Her descendants will eventually occupy important European thrones. But at this moment, she is simply a young woman leaving a city that was supposed to be her home. The road is long. The air is cold. The wheels of the carriage move slowly. Perhaps she looks back. Perhaps Prague is already far behind. The city that welcomed her only months earlier is gone from view. And ahead lies uncertainty. As the night grows quiet, let us leave the road for a while. Let us return to Prague. The city is settling down. The political banners have changed. The rulers have changed. But the river still flows. The buildings still stand. The streets are still there. People still walk through the markets. Bakers still make bread. Craft workers still open their workshops. Children still laugh. The city continues. This is one of the quiet truths of history. Cities survive rulers. Rivers survive battles. Stones survive arguments. And ordinary life often continues even when the people at the top change completely. The Battle of White Mountain had changed the political future of Bohemia. But it had not ended the wider European crisis. Instead, the victory created new fears, new ambitions, new alliances, and new reasons for other rulers to become involved. The 30 Years' War was becoming something much larger. The next stage would take us north. Another ruler would enter the story. His name would be Christian IV of Denmark. He was a king. He was a Protestant. And he would soon decide that the balance of power in Northern Europe was worth defending. His decision would bring a new army into the conflict. A new army would mean new roads, new camps, new demands, and more ordinary people watching soldiers pass through their lands. But we will not hurry. For now, the winter has arrived. The fields are quiet. The roads are hard with cold. The fires burn inside village homes. And somewhere far from Prague, Frederick and Elizabeth are beginning a new life without a kingdom. The title of king has disappeared, but the story has not. Take a slow breath. Let the 17th century countryside become quiet again. The horses rest. The candles burn low. The road stretches into darkness. And the 30 Years' War moves slowly forward. When we return, we will follow the next stage of the conflict. We will meet the Danish king. We will see why he entered the war. And we will take another slow walk through the villages, roads, fields, and towns of a Europe that is gradually becoming trapped inside a much larger conflict. Until then, rest. Let the night become still. And let history wait until the next chapter. Welcome back. Tonight, we continue our slow journey through the 30 Years' War. There is no need to hurry. The road is still long. The war is still young. And much of Europe has not yet realized how far this conflict will spread. In our last chapter, we left Frederick and Elizabeth traveling away from Bohemia. Their brief reign had ended. The Battle of White Mountain had strengthened the Habsburg position. The Bohemian rebellion had been crushed, and Ferdinand now stood in a much stronger position. For a moment, it seemed possible that the conflict might be ending. But peace did not come. Instead, new questions began to appear. What would happen to the Protestant rulers of northern Germany? Would the Habsburg emperor continue to increase his power? Would other Protestant rulers simply watch? And perhaps most importantly, how much power should one family hold in Central Europe? These questions slowly brought another ruler into the story. His name was Christian IV. He was the king of Denmark and Norway. He was a Protestant ruler, and he had reasons of his own for becoming involved. So tonight, let us leave Prague behind. Let us travel north. Imagine a long road through northern Germany. The landscape is different here. The air is cooler. The land is flatter. There are forests, meadows, rivers, small towns, busy ports, and villages surrounded by fields. The roads are used by merchants, farmers, travelers, messengers, and soldiers. A horse pulls a wooden cart. The wheels make a soft sound against the road. A man walks beside it. A woman sits inside. Perhaps they are traveling to a market. Perhaps they are carrying grain. Perhaps they are simply visiting relatives. The world is still moving. But politics is moving too. Christian IV has watched events in Germany carefully. He is not only a king. He is also a political figure with interests in northern Germany. He has territories there. He has influence there. He has economic interests there. The German lands are close to Denmark. And when powerful armies begin moving through northern Germany, Denmark cannot simply ignore them. Christian also has another concern. He is Protestant. The rise of Catholic power worries him. The victory of the Habsburg forces at White Mountain has already changed the balance. And now the emperor's influence is growing. Christian begins to consider intervention. But war is expensive. A king cannot simply announce a war and expect everything to work. Money is needed. Soldiers are needed. Weapons are needed. Horses are needed. Food is needed. Clothing is needed. Roads must be used. Bridges must be crossed. Ships may be required. And once an army begins moving, it becomes difficult to stop. Imagine a royal office in Denmark. A large wooden table stands in the center. Maps cover its surface. There are letters beside them. Some are sealed. Some have already been opened. A candle burns nearby. The king listens as advisors explain the situation. One person speaks about the emperor. Another speaks about Protestant princes. Another speaks about money. Another speaks about military strength. The king listens. Outside, the palace is quiet. Inside, decisions are being made. Christian decides that he will enter the conflict. In 1625, Denmark becomes directly involved. This begins what historians often call the Danish phase of the war. For ordinary people, however, there are no phases. There is simply another army, another group of soldiers, another demand for supplies, another set of uniforms on the road. The Danish king enters the war with confidence. He has an army. He has experience. He has political allies. and he believes he can protect Protestant interests. He also hopes to protect his own influence in northern Germany. But the emperor has powerful commanders. One of the most important is Tilly. We met him in our last chapter. He remains a major figure. But now another commander becomes even more interesting. His name is Albrecht von Wallenstein. Wallenstein is one of the most unusual people of the war. He is wealthy, ambitious, organized, and deeply interested in military power. He is not simply a commander with a small force. He develops the ability to raise and support a very large army. And he does this in a way that changes the nature of the war. Let us slow down and imagine Wallenstein. He is a nobleman from Bohemia. The political changes after White Mountain have created opportunities for him. He gains land. He gains wealth. His influence grows. And he begins building a military force. An army of this period is not like a modern national army. Many soldiers are professional fighters. Many are mercenaries. They serve for pay. Their loyalty may be connected to their commander, their contract, or their hope of gaining wealth. This means that raising an army requires money. Lots of money. Wallenstein understands this. He also understands something else. Armies need food. Armies need clothing. Armies need horses. Armies need wagons. Armies need shelter. An army is like a moving city. Imagine thousands of people traveling together. There are soldiers, officers, servants, cooks, blacksmiths, carpenters, merchants, horse handlers, camp followers, and many others. They all need something. Food must be found. Animals must be fed. Wagons must be repaired. Weapons must be maintained. Shoes wear out. Clothes become dirty. Horses become sick. People become tired. So when an army enters a region, it does not simply pass through. It consumes. And the people living there often have to provide what the army needs. This would become one of the great problems of the 30 Years' War. But we are not there yet. For now, Christian IV is preparing his campaign. He hopes for support from Protestant allies. Some Protestant princes are willing to help. Others remain cautious. The situation is complicated. Everyone wants the emperor's power limited. But not everyone wants a huge war. The Danish king moves south. His army enters northern Germany. At first, the situation seems promising. But the emperor's forces are becoming stronger. Wallenstein's army is growing. Tilly is experienced. And the Protestant side is not united. This is an important pattern in the war. The Catholic side often has disagreements too. But it can sometimes cooperate effectively. The Protestant side has its own divisions. Different princes have different interests. Some want religious freedom. Some want political independence. Some want to protect their lands. Some want to avoid losing money. Some simply want peace. The result is uncertainty. And uncertainty is dangerous during war. Now imagine a small German town in 1626. It is morning. The market is beginning. A baker places fresh bread on a wooden table. A butcher prepares meat. A farmer arrives with vegetables. A merchant opens a stall. Children move through the streets. A dog wanders between carts. It is an ordinary market morning. Then someone notices something on the road. Dust. A long line of movement. Horses. Wagons. Soldiers. The market becomes quieter. People stop talking. The army is approaching. Nobody knows exactly what will happen. Will the soldiers buy food? Will they demand it? Will they stay? Will they continue? Will they be friendly? Will they cause trouble? These questions are not answered immediately. The army moves closer. The road becomes crowded. The sound of horses fills the air. And slowly, the town realizes that the war has arrived. This is what makes the 30 Years' War so important for understanding civilian life. The battlefield was not always far away. Sometimes the battlefield was only a few miles from home. Sometimes soldiers lived inside towns. Sometimes armies demanded money. Sometimes they demanded food. Sometimes they took animals. And sometimes they simply passed through. The experience depended on the place. It depended on the commander. It depended on discipline. It depended on whether supplies were available. But the presence of an army always brought uncertainty. In 1626, Christian's army faced serious problems. The Protestant forces suffered a major defeat at the Battle of Lutter. The battle took place in August. Tilly commanded the Imperial and Catholic League forces. Christian's army was defeated. The defeat weakened his position, and the Danish campaign began to collapse. Christian had hoped to change the balance of the war. Instead, his army was pushed back. The emperor and his allies became stronger. Wallenstein continued to build his influence. The Danish king was now facing a difficult future. But let us step away from the battlefield. Imagine the countryside after an army has passed. The road is covered with deep wheel marks. The grass beside the road is flattened. A few broken pieces of wood lie near a ditch. A farmer looks across his field. Some crops have been damaged. A horse is missing. The family wonders what they will do. There is no modern insurance. There is no quick government assistance. There is no easy way to replace lost animals. A lost horse can mean lost work. A damaged crop can mean hunger. And a demanded payment can mean debt. The war is changing ordinary calculations. A family that had enough food in one year may have too little the next. A village that had a few animals may lose several. A merchant may be unable to travel because roads are unsafe. A town may have fewer customers because people are afraid to travel. The economy begins to feel the pressure. And still the war continues. Christian IV slowly retreats. His hopes of becoming the great defender of German Protestantism are fading. The emperor's position becomes stronger, and Wallenstein's power grows. Wallenstein is now one of the most important military figures in Europe. His army becomes enormous. He is given new lands and titles. He becomes wealthy. His influence reaches the imperial court. But his success also creates fear. Some princes worry that he is becoming too powerful. Even people on his own side begin to wonder whether he wants more than military success. Wallenstein has his own ambitions. He is intelligent. He understands politics. He understands money. And he understands the importance of a large army. His army follows him. But an army that large must be fed. And here we return to ordinary people. Imagine a village on the route of Wallenstein's army. The villagers hear that soldiers are coming. They look at their grain stores. They count their animals. They hide some food. They wonder whether hiding it is safe. A family may place sacks of grain beneath a floor. Another may hide valuables inside a wall. Someone may send animals into the forest. Another may simply hope that the soldiers will not stay long. These small actions are part of civilian survival. People learn to become careful. They learn to listen for rumors. They learn which roads are safer. They learn which soldiers are more disciplined. They learn when to leave. And sometimes they simply remain at home and wait. The war changes people's sense of time. A normal year is measured by seasons. Planting, harvest, winter. But now another calendar exists. The arrival of soldiers. The movement of armies. The payment of taxes. The arrival of messengers. The outbreak of disease. The shortage of food. The return of soldiers. Life becomes less predictable. Still, not every day is terrible. This is important. People do not spend 30 years doing nothing but suffer. They still celebrate weddings. They still raise children. They still attend religious services. They still work. They still laugh. They still tell stories. They still drink beer or wine. They still visit neighbors. They still repair roofs. They still plant gardens. Human life continues even during war. Perhaps a child born in 1626 has no understanding of the political world. The child knows only the home, the mother, the father, the sound of the village bell, the smell of bread, the warmth of a fire, the fields outside. For that child, the war is simply something adults discuss, something that causes people to worry, something connected to soldiers on the road. And perhaps that child grows older without ever seeing the people who began the conflict. This is another quiet truth of history. Wars are often decided by people who never meet the people who suffer their consequences. Now let us return to the royal world. Christian IV has been defeated. His position is weakening. The emperor has more power. Wallenstein is stronger. Tilly remains important. And Ferdinand believes that he has an opportunity to reshape the empire. In 1629, the emperor issues an important decree. It becomes known as the Edict of Restitution. Its purpose is connected to church lands. The emperor wants certain Catholic Church properties that had been taken by Protestants to be returned. This is a major political and religious decision. For Catholic leaders, it is a victory. For many Protestants, it is alarming. They fear that the emperor is going too far. They fear that Protestant political power will shrink. They fear that the old religious balance is disappearing. And once again, a political decision increases tension. The war has now lasted for more than 10 years. But remember our original journey. The name is 30 Years' War. We are not even halfway through. And already the conflict has changed. It began with Bohemia. Then Denmark entered. Now the conflict is affecting a much larger part of the German lands. More rulers are becoming involved. More soldiers are moving. More communities are paying the cost. And still, another major change is approaching. Far to the north, across the Baltic Sea, another Protestant power is watching carefully. Sweden. And Sweden has a powerful king. His name is Gustavus Adolphus. He will become one of the most famous military leaders of the entire war. But before we meet him, let us remain for a little while with the people of northern Germany. Imagine a quiet evening. A family sits inside a small house. The windows are small. The fire is low. A pot hangs above it. Someone is mending clothing. Someone is preparing tomorrow's bread. The children are tired. Outside, the wind moves through the trees. There are no electric lights. There is no sound of engines. Only the occasional footsteps of someone walking through the village. Perhaps the family feels safe tonight. The army is far away. The road is empty. The fields are quiet. For one night there is peace. This is what people wanted. Not glory, not crowns, not great victories. Just peace. A peaceful night. A good harvest. Healthy children. Enough food. A warm house. And the knowledge that tomorrow will probably look much like today. But the 30 Years' War was slowly taking that certainty away. The Danish intervention had failed. Christian IV was retreating. The emperor was stronger. Wallenstein was powerful. And Protestant rulers were becoming increasingly worried. As the night grows quiet, let us return to the road. The army has moved on. The village is still. The moon is high. The fields are silver under the night sky. A few windows glow with candlelight. Somewhere a horse makes a soft sound inside a stable. The wind passes through the trees. The war seems far away again. But it is not gone. It is waiting. And soon another king will cross into the German lands. He will come from Sweden. He will bring a disciplined army. He will bring new military ideas. And he will become a central figure in the next chapter of our story. His name is Gustavus Adolphus, the Lion of the North. But tonight, we do not need to hurry toward him. Let the road remain quiet. Let the fields rest. Let the candles burn low. Christian IV's campaign has ended. But the war continues. The Danish king could not stop the Habsburg advance. The Protestant cause has suffered another setback. And the people of Germany are becoming tired. They have seen armies. They have paid taxes. They have lost crops. They have watched roads fill with soldiers. They have heard rumors. And many of them wonder how much longer this can continue. They do not yet know the answer. Nobody does. The conflict has already lasted years. And more years are coming. So take a slow breath. Imagine the old roads beneath your feet. Imagine the distant sound of a cart. Imagine a village sleeping beneath the stars. The year is moving toward 1630. The next great chapter is waiting. Sweden is preparing. Gustavus Adolphus is watching. And the 30 Years' War is about to enter one of its most important stages. For now, though, let the story become quiet. The fields are dark. The roads are empty. The soldiers have moved on. And somewhere far away, across the cold Baltic Sea, a Swedish king is preparing to step into the story. The night is quiet now. The roads of northern Europe are dark. The villages have settled into sleep. And somewhere across the Baltic Sea, ships are moving slowly through cold water. Tonight, our journey takes us north, toward Sweden, toward a young king, toward a new stage of the 30 Years' War. His name was Gustavus Adolphus. To many people of his time, he was a powerful Protestant ruler. To his supporters, he was a defender of the Protestant cause. To his enemies, he was a dangerous military leader. And to later generations, he became known as the Lion of the North. But before he became a famous commander, he was simply a king trying to protect his country. So let us begin quietly. Imagine Sweden in the early 17th century. The land is cold. The winters are long. Forests cover large parts of the countryside. Lakes shine beneath pale skies. The Baltic Sea connects Sweden to other lands. There are towns, fishing villages, farms, woodlands, mines, and small roads stretching between them. Stockholm is the center of the kingdom. It is a city built among islands and waterways. Ships come and go. Merchants trade goods. Fishermen bring their catches. Wood and iron leave the country. Foreign goods arrive. The sea is part of everyday life. For Sweden, the Baltic Sea is especially important. It is not simply a body of water. It is a road made of water. Through it, Sweden can trade. Through it, Sweden can move soldiers. Through it, Sweden can communicate with other territories. And Sweden wants influence around this sea. The King of Sweden in 1630 is Gustavus Adolphus. He is not an old man. He is still relatively young, but he already has years of experience. He became king as a teenager. Since then, he has been involved in wars against neighboring powers. He knows what war costs. He knows how difficult it is to feed soldiers. He knows that armies must be organized. He knows that discipline matters. And he knows that political decisions can become military problems. Gustavus also has a close advisor. His name is Axel Oxenstierna. Oxenstierna is an experienced statesman. He understands government. He understands money. He understands diplomacy. The king and his advisor work together to strengthen Sweden. They improve administration. They improve taxation. They organize military resources. They build the ability of the state to support an army. This matters because Gustavus is about to enter a war far from Sweden. He needs ships. He needs soldiers. He needs food. He needs money. And he needs a reason to fight. The emperor's growing influence in northern Germany concerns Sweden. The Baltic Sea is important to Swedish security. If the emperor and his allies gain too much influence along the German coast, Sweden may feel threatened. There are also religious concerns. Gustavus is a Lutheran king. The rise of Catholic power worries him. But religion is only one part of the story. Politics matters. Security matters. Trade matters. Swedish influence matters. And Gustavus understands all of these things. In 1630, he decides to intervene. A Swedish army crosses the Baltic. Imagine the scene. It is early summer. Ships are gathered along the coast. Soldiers prepare to board. Horses are loaded. Barrels of food are carried onto ships. Weapons are checked. Clothing is packed. Officers study maps. Sailors prepare ropes and sails. The sea is calm. The Swedish coast stretches behind them. The soldiers do not know exactly what the future holds. Some are experienced. Others are young. Some may have joined because they need money. Others are serving their king. They look across the water. Germany is somewhere beyond the horizon. The ships begin to move. Slowly, the coastline becomes smaller. The sea grows wider. And Sweden enters the next chapter of the war. When Gustavus lands in northern Germany, the political situation is complicated. The Protestant princes are cautious. Some are afraid to support him. They do not want to anger the emperor. Others are relieved. They believe Sweden may be strong enough to resist Habsburg power. Gustavus begins building his position. His army is disciplined. His soldiers are organized. He has a reputation for treating military organization seriously. But his army is not enormous at first. He needs allies. He needs time. And he needs a major success. The emperor's forces are still powerful. Wallenstein, however, has temporarily fallen from favor. His growing influence had made some rulers uncomfortable. The emperor had dismissed him. This left Tilly as one of the main commanders. And Tilly was still active. He was now an older man. He had spent decades fighting. He had defeated Christian of Denmark. He had defeated Protestant forces before. He was experienced, and he was about to face a very different opponent. Gustavus Adolphus, the Swedish king, was not simply interested in large battles. He believed in mobility. He valued discipline. He used artillery carefully. He worked to improve coordination between infantry, cavalry, and guns. His army could move efficiently. His soldiers trained regularly. This made the Swedish force different from many armies of the period. But the most important thing was perhaps Gustavus himself. He was willing to take risks. He understood that his army needed to move. He understood that waiting could be dangerous. And he knew that a victory could change political opinions. Meanwhile, the emperor's power was creating fear. The Edict of Restitution had worried many Protestant rulers. The emperor appeared stronger than ever. And then in 1631, something happened that shocked Europe. The city of Magdeburg was attacked. Magdeburg was a Protestant city. It had resisted the imperial forces. The city became a symbol of Protestant resistance. Imperial forces surrounded it. The siege lasted for months. Inside the city, people lived with fear. Imagine the city at night. The gates are closed. Walls surround the streets. Soldiers stand guard. Families remain inside their homes. Food becomes harder to obtain. People listen for sounds beyond the walls. The future is uncertain. Outside the city, soldiers build positions. Cannons are prepared. Orders are given. The siege continues. Then in May 1631, the city was stormed. The fighting became chaotic. A great fire spread through parts of Magdeburg. Large numbers of people died. The destruction shocked Europe. News traveled quickly. The exact details were often mixed with rumors. But the basic message was clear. Magdeburg had been destroyed. For Protestant communities, the event became a symbol of fear. For Gustavus, it was also a warning. If he did not act, more Protestant cities might fall. His army needed to move. He needed allies. And he needed to confront Tilly. As we move through this part of the story, remember the ordinary people. Imagine a family living in a German town far from Magdeburg. They hear the news. Perhaps it arrives through a traveler. Perhaps through a letter. Perhaps through a merchant. The family listens. The children may not understand. The adults speak quietly. They wonder if the war is coming closer. They look at the road. They watch passing soldiers. And they hope their town will remain safe. The 30 Years' War is becoming more frightening. But our story remains slow. We are not rushing from one battlefield to another. We are looking at how the world feels. The year is 1631. The harvest season approaches. Fields are full of grain. Farmers work from morning until evening. But now there are soldiers on the roads. Some towns build defenses. Some rulers gather troops. Some families hide food. Some merchants avoid dangerous roads. And the Swedish army continues moving. Gustavus wants to force the imperial army to fight. Tilly wants to stop him. The two armies meet near Breitenfeld. The Battle of Breitenfeld takes place in September 1631. It becomes one of Gustavus Adolphus's greatest victories. The Swedish army and its allies defeat Tilly's forces. The result is important. It proves that the emperor's army can be defeated. Protestant rulers gain confidence. Gustavus becomes a major figure in European politics. The balance of power changes again. Imagine the evening after the battle. The battlefield is quiet. The armies are exhausted. Smoke hangs in the air. Wagons move slowly. Soldiers search for their units. Officers discuss what happened. The wounded are being cared for. The dead remain on the field. There is no celebration for everyone. For soldiers, victory and loss are mixed together. Some have survived. Some have lost friends. Some have lost brothers. Some are simply tired. And beyond the battlefield, ordinary people are already thinking about tomorrow. The roads will need to be repaired. The wounded will need help. The armies will move again. And the countryside will have to support them. Gustavus's victory gives him momentum. He moves deeper into Germany. Cities begin to open their gates. Some Protestant rulers join him. Others wait. The emperor is worried. The Habsburg position has been shaken. And once again, Wallenstein enters the story. The emperor needs him. The man who had been dismissed is called back. Wallenstein raises another army. His return changes the situation. He is now more powerful than before. He has experience. He has soldiers. He has influence. And he is determined to shape events. Gustavus and Wallenstein are now moving toward a confrontation. But before that confrontation comes, Gustavus continues through Germany. Imagine his army traveling through a quiet landscape. Thousands of people are moving. There are wagons, horses, guns, food supplies, tents, tools. The army is a moving community. And behind it are people who must supply it. Villages along the route may be asked for grain. Towns may be asked for money. Merchants may be ordered to provide goods. Farmers may lose animals. This is how the war becomes part of everyday life. A battle might happen once, but supplying an army happens every day. A soldier eats every day. A horse eats every day. A wagon needs repairs. A gun needs ammunition. Clothing needs replacement. Shoes wear out. So the war creates a constant pressure on the countryside. And this pressure becomes greater as armies grow. Gustavus's army is moving. Wallenstein's army is gathering. The emperor is watching. The Protestant princes are watching. And Europe is watching. But let us pause. Imagine a small village at sunset. The army has not arrived yet. The villagers know it may come. They have heard rumors. They have seen smoke on the horizon. A family sits outside their house. The youngest child is playing with a piece of wood. An older child is carrying water. A woman is preparing food. A man is repairing a fence. For a few minutes, everything feels normal. The sky is soft. The birds are settling. The fields are quiet. Then the sound of distant hooves appears. The family stops. They listen. The sound fades. Perhaps the soldiers are on another road. Perhaps they will never arrive. The family returns to its work. This is how uncertainty feels. Not constant action, but constant waiting. Waiting for news. Waiting for soldiers. Waiting for taxes. Waiting for harvest. Waiting for peace. And sometimes waiting for the war to pass. In 1632, Gustavus continues his campaign. He moves towards southern Germany. He crosses rivers. He takes cities. He negotiates with rulers. He becomes increasingly powerful. But Wallenstein is also moving. The two armies approach each other. They meet near the town of Lutzen. It is November 1632. The weather is cold. The landscape is open. The battle begins. Gustavus leads his troops personally. He is not the kind of king who always remains far from danger. He rides with his army. The fighting becomes confused. Smoke from guns fills the air. Visibility is poor. Horses move through the battlefield. Commands are difficult to hear. The battle continues. And then Gustavus is killed. The Swedish king is dead. The news spreads through the army. For his soldiers, the loss is enormous. For Protestant Europe, it is a shock. For the emperor's forces, however, the battle does not become a clear victory. The Swedish army remains strong. Gustavus is gone. But the Swedish military system he helped build continues. His death changes the war. A great leader has disappeared. But the conflict does not end. This is another strange feature of history. People may become symbols, but institutions continue. Armies continue. Governments continue. Alliances continue. And wars can continue even after their most famous leaders are gone. Gustavus's death also changes the way people remember him. He becomes almost legendary. The Lion of the North. A Protestant hero. A great military commander. But behind the legend was a man who had ruled Sweden. A husband. A father. A king. A commander. And a person who made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Now, let us return to the quiet world. The battlefield at Lutzen is silent. The smoke has cleared. The soldiers are tired. The king is dead. Night has arrived. The stars appear above the fields. Somewhere a campfire burns. A soldier sits beside it. He may not know what will happen next. He may think about home. Perhaps home is far away. Perhaps he has not seen his family for months. He may think about Sweden, about forests, about cold lakes, about familiar voices. And perhaps for a moment, the war feels very far away. But tomorrow, the army will move again. The war will continue. The Swedish forces will remain in Germany. The emperor will continue fighting. Wallenstein will remain a central figure. And the political situation will become even more complicated. The year 1632 is ending. The war has already lasted 14 years. It began with a rebellion in Bohemia. It has now spread across much of Central Europe. Armies from Sweden are fighting in Germany. Catholic forces are fighting Protestant forces. Princes are changing alliances. Cities are being occupied. Villages are being taxed. And ordinary people are becoming increasingly exhausted. Yet the war still has many years ahead. So tonight, we will not rush forward. Let us stay with the quiet aftermath of Lutzen. Imagine walking across the countryside after the armies have left. The road is muddy. The fields are damaged. A broken wagon stands beside a path. A few pieces of equipment have been abandoned. The grass has been trampled. The wind moves across the open land. There is no great sound now. Only nature. Birds return. Clouds move. The river continues flowing. The seasons continue. The land does not understand politics. The land simply remains. And perhaps that is why the countryside feels so peaceful in the distance. The war is something humans have created. The fields do not care which king wins. The river does not care which religion a ruler follows. The trees continue growing. The seasons continue changing. And people, despite everything, continue living. As the night grows quiet, let us slowly leave Lutzen. The road ahead is long. The Swedish king is gone. But Sweden remains. The Habsburgs remain. Wallenstein remains. And the war continues. The next part of our journey will take us deeper into the difficult middle years. We will see how alliances begin to change. We will see how Wallenstein's position becomes uncertain. We will see how rulers who once seemed to be enemies begin to consider negotiation. And we will spend more time with the ordinary people who are trying to survive in a Europe where peace always seems close, and then somehow moves away again. For now, though, let the night settle. The battlefield is quiet. The horses are resting. The soldiers are sleeping. The fires are becoming smaller. And somewhere in the darkness, a lone bell rings across the countryside. The 30 Years' War moves forward. Slowly, 1 year at a time, one road at a time, one generation at a time. Take a slow breath. Let the old world become quiet. And let us leave the Lion of the North beneath the cold sky of 1632. The next chapter will begin with the question that remained after his death. What happens when a great king is gone? But the war he entered is still far from finished. The night has become still. The fields around Lutzen are quiet now. The smoke has disappeared. The soldiers who survived are resting. And the cold wind moves gently across the open land. Only a short time ago, Gustavus Adolphus was alive. He was a king, a commander, a father, a husband, and one of the most important figures in the 30 Years' War. Now he is gone. Yet the war continues. This is where our journey begins tonight. Not with another great battle, but with a quiet question. What happens to a war when one of its greatest leaders disappears? The answer is not simple, because armies are larger than one person. Governments are larger than one person. And political fears can survive the people who created them. So let us take a slow walk through Europe in the years after Gustavus Adolphus. Imagine the countryside of Germany. It is late in the year 1632. The days are short. The evenings are cold. Fields lie quiet beneath the winter sky. In many villages, people are preparing for winter. Wood is being collected. Food is being stored. Animals are being brought into barns. Clothing is being repaired. Families are trying to make their homes warm. But the war has changed their lives. The old rhythm of the seasons is still there. Yet something else has been added. The movement of armies. People listen for the sound of horses. They watch the roads. They hear rumors. A stranger may arrive and say that an army is nearby. A merchant may bring news from another town. A soldier may tell a story that sounds almost unbelievable. And nobody knows which story is true. The people of Germany have learned to live with uncertainty. But uncertainty is tiring. A person can endure fear for a short time. It is much harder to endure it year after year. The 30 Years' War has now lasted 14 years. Many children born at the beginning of the conflict are old enough to remember nothing else. Imagine a child born in 1618. That child is now 14. He or she has grown up during war. The child remembers soldiers on roads. The child remembers adults speaking quietly. The child may have seen families leave their homes. The child may have heard church bells during times of danger. For this young person, war is not an unusual event. It is part of the world. This is one of the saddest effects of long wars. They can become normal. People learn to live around them. They learn how to adapt. They learn how to survive. And sometimes they forget what peace felt like. Now let us return to the political world. Gustavus is dead, but Sweden remains involved. The Swedish army remains in Germany. Swedish leaders do not want to give up the gains they have made. They also do not want the Habsburgs to become too powerful. Gustavus's chancellor, Axel Oxenstierna, becomes extremely important. He helps guide Swedish policy. He is not a battlefield king. He is a statesman. He thinks carefully. He understands that Sweden cannot fight forever without support. Money is needed. Allies are needed. Supplies are needed. Diplomacy is needed. And so Oxenstierna works to keep the Swedish position alive. The Protestant princes also have difficult choices. Some are happy to cooperate with Sweden. Others worry about Swedish influence. Some want peace. Some want territory. Some want religious rights. The war has never been a simple story of two perfectly united sides. It is a web of interests. Sometimes the same ruler may cooperate with one side for one reason and oppose it for another. Politics can be confusing. And during a long war, alliances can change. One of the most important changes concerns Wallenstein. We last saw him at Lutzen. His army had fought Gustavus. The Swedish king died. But Wallenstein did not gain the clear victory he wanted. After the battle, questions began to surround him. Was he loyal to the emperor? Was he negotiating secretly with Protestant rulers? Was he planning to make his own peace? Was he trying to gain too much power? These questions were dangerous. Wallenstein was already extremely powerful. He commanded a large army. He controlled territory. He had wealth. He had political influence. And the Emperor Ferdinand II had begun to worry about him. A commander can become dangerous when his army becomes more loyal to him than to the ruler who pays for it. So Wallenstein's position became fragile. Imagine him in a large room. Maps cover a table. Letters are stacked nearby. A fire burns in the fireplace. Outside, guards stand in the cold. Wallenstein knows that political winds are changing. He may believe he can negotiate. He may believe he can bring the war toward peace. But the emperor does not fully trust him. And when a ruler stops trusting a powerful commander, danger follows. In early 1634, Wallenstein was removed from command. He was now in serious danger. He traveled to the town of Eger. Today it is known as Cheb. There in February 1634, Wallenstein was assassinated. The man who had once commanded one of the greatest armies in Europe was dead. His political career had ended. His life had ended. And once again, the war had lost one of its great figures. But the war continued. This is something that repeats throughout the 30 Years' War. A leader appears. A leader rises. A leader becomes powerful. Then the leader disappears. But the armies remain. The political problems remain. And ordinary people continue to live with the consequences. After Wallenstein's death, the emperor's forces became stronger. And then came another major battle. The Battle of Nördlingen. It took place in 1634. The imperial forces, supported by Spanish troops, defeated the Swedish and Protestant forces. The defeat was serious. The Swedish position in southern Germany weakened. The Protestant cause again faced difficulty. But by now, something important was happening. The religious divisions that had helped begin the war were becoming mixed with larger political interests. And one of the greatest examples was France. France was a Catholic country. The Habsburgs were also Catholic. You might expect France to support the emperor. But politics does not always follow religion. France feared the growing power of the Habsburg family. The Habsburgs surrounded France in several directions. Spain was ruled by the Spanish branch of the Habsburgs. The emperor was part of the Austrian Habsburg family. France did not want these branches to become too powerful. So France began supporting the enemies of the Habsburgs. At first, France offered money and political support. But eventually, France entered the war directly. This was one of the great turning points. The war was changing again. It was no longer mainly a religious conflict. It was increasingly a struggle over European power. That distinction matters. A Catholic France could fight Catholic Habsburg rulers. Why? Because states often place political survival above religious friendship. The world of 17th century Europe was not divided into simple groups. It was complicated. And now the conflict would become even more complicated. In 1635, France entered the war openly. The French army began fighting the Spanish and imperial forces. The war expanded. The map grew larger. The number of armies increased. And the German countryside became even more important as a military landscape. Now imagine a road in central Germany. A French unit moves along it. Later, an imperial unit uses the same road. Then another army passes. The villagers watch. Each army needs food. Each army needs horses. Each army needs shelter. And the village must somehow survive between them. This is where the human cost becomes clear. A war that begins in a palace can end in a kitchen. A political decision can become an empty grain store. A military campaign can become a family searching for a missing cow. A treaty dispute can become a broken roof. The great names of history are important, but the quiet details are important too. Bread, wood, water, shoes, animals, fields, homes. These are the things ordinary people needed. And these were the things armies consumed. The war also affected travel. A road that had once connected two markets might become dangerous. Merchants might avoid certain regions. People might stay close to home. Letters might be delayed. Prices might rise. A shortage in one region could affect another. The economy became unstable. Yet again, we should remember that life was not simply misery every day. People adapted. Farmers learned to hide food. Merchants changed routes. Families moved to safer towns. Some communities built stronger defenses. People developed habits of survival. They learned which soldiers were passing through. They learned how to negotiate. They learned how to avoid unnecessary attention. Some people even found opportunities. War created demand for horses, for food, for clothing, for weapons, for transport, for building materials. Some merchants became wealthy. Some soldiers became wealthy. Some landowners gained property. War could destroy, but war could also create fortunes. This made the conflict even harder to understand. There was no single experience. One person could become rich. Another could lose everything. One city could prosper. Another could be destroyed. One ruler could gain territory. Another could lose a kingdom. History is rarely equal. Now let us return to the political world. After the Battle of Nördlingen, the Swedish position was weakened. Some German Protestant princes began looking for peace. The emperor saw an opportunity. In 1635, the Peace of Prague was agreed. It attempted to bring many German rulers back into cooperation with the emperor. Some Protestant rulers accepted. The agreement reduced some of the religious conflict. For a moment, peace seemed possible. Imagine the news reaching a village. A messenger arrives. People hear that an agreement has been made. Perhaps there will be no more soldiers. Perhaps taxes will fall. Perhaps the roads will become safer. Perhaps families can return home. Hope begins to appear. But the larger European conflict does not disappear. France is now involved. Spain remains involved. Sweden remains involved. The Habsburgs remain involved. And the war continues. This is one of the most frustrating parts of the story. Peace can appear close, but then another political interest keeps the fighting alive. A treaty may solve one problem, but not another. A ruler may be willing to compromise, but another ruler may not. The conflict becomes difficult to end because so many people now have something to gain. And so the war moves into its later years. The landscape of Germany has changed. Some villages are smaller. Some towns have lost people. Some fields are abandoned. Some churches have been damaged. Some roads are quieter. But people continue. A child grows into an adult. A young soldier becomes an older soldier. A farmer becomes a grandfather. A marriage takes place. A baby is born. Life moves forward even while war continues. Imagine a woman standing beside a small window. She looks out at a field. Her parents once worked there. Her husband works there now. Her children will probably work there later. The field has survived. The seasons have continued. The wheat still grows. And perhaps she wonders when peace will finally return. She does not know that the war still has years ahead. She does not know that Sweden and France will continue fighting. She does not know that Spain will continue fighting. She does not know that diplomats are already thinking about peace. She only knows what she can see. The field, the house, the road, the people she loves. That is enough. As the night grows quieter, let us think about time. The 30 Years' War began in 1618. By now, more than 15 years have passed. A whole generation is growing up. Political leaders have changed. Commanders have died. Kings have died. Alliances have changed. But the war remains. This is why the name is so powerful. 30 years. An entire period of life. A child can be born when the war begins and become an adult before it ends. A young man can enter the army at the beginning and become an old soldier by the end. A woman can marry during the war and raise children while the war continues. A village can change completely. And yet the calendar keeps moving. Winter, spring, summer, autumn, again and again. The fields grow. The fields are harvested. Snow falls. The snow melts. And the armies return. Let us imagine one more evening in a German village. The year is somewhere in the late 1630s. The house is simple. The family has finished its meal. The fire is low. A child is sleeping. An older person sits quietly near the wall. Someone is repairing a shoe. Outside, the wind moves through the trees. There are no soldiers nearby tonight. There is no battle. There is only peace. A small peace. A private peace. The kind of peace people could still find even during a long war. Perhaps someone tells a story. Perhaps they remember relatives who left. Perhaps they talk about the price of grain. Perhaps they simply sit together. And for a few minutes, the war does not exist. This is how people survive long periods of uncertainty. They create small islands of normal life. A meal, a conversation, a song, a prayer, a wedding, a birthday, a warm fire, a quiet evening. These small things matter. Because history is not only made in royal palaces. It is also made around kitchen tables. Now slowly, we move toward the final decade. The war is becoming less about religion, more about power, more about territory, more about bargaining. France wants to weaken the Habsburgs. Sweden wants influence in Northern Europe. Spain wants to maintain its power. The emperor wants to preserve his authority. German princes want security. And ordinary people want peace. Those goals do not always fit together. The diplomats will eventually have to find a way. But first, there will be more fighting, more campaigns, more suffering, and more years. Still, the possibility of peace is becoming stronger. Even rulers who continue fighting understand that the conflict cannot continue forever. The costs are too high. The armies are expensive. The populations are exhausted. The countryside is damaged. And the political situation is changing. The great question is no longer simply who will win. It is becoming, how can Europe live with itself after the war? That question will lead us toward the great peace negotiations. But before we reach them, there is still a long road. So tonight we will stop here. The year is moving toward the 1640s. The war has become a part of European life. The people have become tired. The rulers have become cautious. And the diplomats are beginning to think seriously about a settlement. The roads remain busy. But perhaps now there is a different feeling. A quiet wish. A hope. A belief that maybe, someday, the fighting will end. Imagine the countryside at night. The moon is above the fields. The trees are still. A small house glows with candlelight. Inside, a family sleeps. Outside, the road is empty. No army passes tonight. No messenger arrives. No cannon sounds. There is only the wind. And for one peaceful night, that is enough. The war continues. But peace is beginning to appear somewhere on the horizon. Far away, diplomats are preparing for a new kind of battle. Not with guns. Not with horses. Not with armies. But with words. Letters. Maps. Arguments. Promises. And eventually treaties. The final chapters of the 30 Years' War will be shaped not only by soldiers, but by people sitting around tables and trying to decide what Europe should look like when the fighting finally stops. For now, rest. Let the road become quiet. Let the fields become dark. Let the old houses settle into the night. The Lion of the North is gone. Wallenstein is gone. Tilly's great campaigns are fading into memory. But the war continues. And the people of Europe are waiting. Waiting for the next morning. Waiting for another harvest. Waiting for another letter. And above all, waiting for peace. The night is calm. The roads are quiet. And the fields of Central Europe are resting beneath a dark sky. We have traveled a long way already. We have seen the first rebellion in Bohemia. We have watched Frederick become the Winter King. We have followed Christian of Denmark into the war. We have crossed the Baltic Sea with Gustavus Adolphus. And we have stood quietly beside the battlefield at Lutzen after the Swedish king was gone. We have also seen France enter the conflict. The war has changed many times, but it has not ended. Now we enter one of its longest and most tiring periods. The years of the 1630s and early 1640s. These are years when the war seems to become part of the landscape itself. The armies come. The armies go. The seasons change. The fields are planted. The fields are harvested. And still the war continues. For many people, there is no longer a clear beginning or ending to the conflict. There is simply life during wartime. So tonight, let us slow down even more. Imagine that you're standing beside a quiet village road. The road is old. The surface is uneven. There are deep marks from carts. Grass grows along the edges. A few trees stand beside the path. Beyond them are fields. The fields are not empty. Farmers are working. Someone is cutting grass. Someone is repairing a fence. A woman carries a basket toward a house. Children walk behind her. It could be an ordinary peaceful day. And in some ways it is. But the war is never very far away. There may be soldiers in the next town. An army may be approaching from the south. A tax collector may arrive tomorrow. A messenger may bring news of fighting somewhere else. People have learned to listen. They listen to the road. They listen to rumors. They listen to the church bells. And they listen to one another. The longer the war continues, the more people learn how to survive it. This does not mean that life becomes easy. It means people become experienced. They know what to hide. They know what to carry. They know which roads to avoid. They know when to leave animals in the forest. They know which valuables can be buried. They know which stories to believe. And they know that a soldier's arrival can change everything. Imagine a small farm. There are only a few buildings. A house. A barn. A shed. Perhaps a small garden. The family keeps chickens. Maybe a cow. Perhaps a pig. The family grows grain. They have enough food for normal times. But an army arrives. The soldiers need food. The officers demand supplies. The family looks at the barn. There is grain inside. There are animals. There is wood. The family has to decide what can be given and what must be hidden. If too much is taken, the family may not survive the winter. If the family refuses, there may be consequences. So people negotiate. They plead. They hide. They offer what they can. Sometimes the soldiers accept. Sometimes they do not. This is the daily reality of a war fought across farmland. The battlefield is not always a field where armies meet. Sometimes the battlefield is the kitchen. Sometimes it is the barn. Sometimes it is the road. Sometimes it is the market. The war reaches people through supplies. And armies need enormous amounts of supplies. A soldier needs food every day. A horse needs food every day. A cannon needs ammunition. A wagon needs repairs. A camp needs wood. An army is a moving town. And that moving town must be fed by the surrounding countryside. This system creates pressure. And when the war lasts year after year, that pressure becomes heavy. Some regions suffer more than others. Areas where armies repeatedly pass through can become deeply damaged. Other areas are safer. Some towns grow because they become places where merchants gather. Other towns decline because trade becomes dangerous. Geography matters. Roads matter. Rivers matter. Fortresses matter. And the location of a village can sometimes determine its fate. A village beside a major road may see many armies. A village hidden in a forest may see fewer. A town near a river may become strategically important. A city with strong walls may become a target. Every place has its own story. Now let us move back to the larger political world. By the late 1630s, the conflict has become a European war. France is fighting the Habsburg powers. Sweden is still fighting. Spain is deeply involved. The Holy Roman Empire remains divided. German princes are making their own decisions. The old religious argument is still present. But politics has become even more important. France and Spain are both major powers. Their rivalry is much older than the 30 Years' War. They are competing for influence in Europe. France wants to prevent Habsburg encirclement. Spain wants to protect its position. The war in Germany is connected to these larger struggles. This means the conflict has become difficult to end. Even if some German rulers want peace, the great powers may continue fighting. A treaty in one place may not solve a dispute somewhere else. And so the war continues. Imagine a diplomat traveling along a road. He carries letters. Perhaps he has several sealed documents. He travels with servants. He may carry clothing for a long journey. He may stay in inns. He may cross rivers by boat. He may wait for horses. Travel is slow. A journey that would take hours today may take days. A journey across Europe may take weeks. And every border matters. Different territories have different rulers, different officials, different taxes, different roads. The diplomat must constantly explain who he is. He must show documents. He must speak carefully. He must know which ruler controls which region. And all the while he carries news. In this period, news is power. A ruler who learns about an enemy's movement early has an advantage. A commander who receives information about supplies can change his plans. A diplomat who knows what another court wants can negotiate. Letters become weapons of a different kind. They move slowly, but they connect Europe. Now imagine a letter arriving at a palace. The seal is broken. The contents are read. The news may concern a battle, a death, a marriage, a new alliance, a financial problem, a military movement. The recipient thinks. Then another letter is written. The new letter is sealed. A messenger prepares his horse, and the process begins again. This is how decisions move across 17th century Europe. Slowly, carefully, one letter at a time. Meanwhile, ordinary people wait. They may not know what is happening in distant capitals. They only know that something has changed when soldiers arrive. This difference between political time and ordinary time is important. A ruler may spend months thinking about an alliance. A diplomat may spend weeks negotiating. But a farmer may experience the decision in one afternoon. The army arrives. The demand is made. The food is taken. The war becomes real. Now let us think about religion. By this point, the war has become more complicated than the original Catholic-Protestant division. Yet religion still matters deeply. Churches remain important. People still pray. Religious leaders still speak about the conflict. Families still identify with their traditions. A Catholic family may fear Protestant soldiers. A Protestant family may fear Catholic troops. But soldiers themselves may come from many places. A Catholic army may include men who are fighting for money. A Protestant army may also include men who are fighting for money. This is another reason the war becomes complicated. The personal beliefs of soldiers and the political goals of rulers are not always the same. A soldier may fight because he needs wages. A ruler may fight because he wants territory. A preacher may speak about religion. A merchant may think about trade. A farmer may think about grain. Everyone sees the war differently, and yet they are all connected to it. Let us return to a village. It is Sunday morning. The church bell rings. People gather. They wear their best clothes. The streets are quiet. For a short time, the war is forgotten. People listen to prayers. They sing. They sit together. A child becomes restless. An old man looks toward the door. Someone whispers about an army scene on the road. But the service continues. This is a small moment, and it tells us something important. People needed routine. Religion gave them routine. The church calendar gave shape to the year. Even during war, people knew when Christmas was coming. They knew when Easter would arrive. They knew when harvest festivals would take place. They knew when marriages could be celebrated. These rhythms helped people feel that life was still normal. Now let us move toward the cities. A 17th century German city could be a busy place. There are workshops, markets, churches, town halls, warehouses, breweries, bakeries, homes. The streets are narrow. The buildings are close together. Merchants sell cloth. Leather workers make shoes. Blacksmiths repair tools. Carpenters work with wood. Women sell food. Children carry messages. People meet in markets. But war changes the city. Food prices may rise. Refugees may arrive. Soldiers may be stationed nearby. Taxes may increase. Walls may need repair. The city government may need to raise money. And disease may become a problem. Large groups of people moving through crowded spaces create conditions in which illness can spread. The 17th century has no modern medicine. There are no antibiotics. There is no modern understanding of germs. People do what they can. They pray. They isolate sick people when possible. They use traditional remedies. They rely on local healers. But disease can be deadly. And war makes everything worse. A weakened population is less able to survive illness. A damaged town has fewer resources. A refugee may arrive without food. A soldier may bring illness from another region. And so disease becomes another quiet companion of war. Not every illness is caused by the war. But war makes many problems harder. Now imagine a town at night. The gates are closed. A guard stands nearby. A few lamps burn. The streets are mostly empty. Inside homes, families are sleeping. Perhaps someone is sick. Perhaps someone is waiting for a relative. Perhaps someone is writing a letter. Outside, a horse moves along the street. A soldier speaks softly. Then everything becomes quiet again. The war is still there. But for a few hours, the town rests. This is how the long middle years feel. Not one continuous battle, but a pattern. Movement, waiting, rumors, taxes, harvest, winter, then movement again. The seasons continue. And so does the war. By the early 1640s, people across Europe are exhausted. The great powers are spending enormous amounts of money. The armies are expensive. The political situation is changing. Some rulers have died. New rulers have taken their places. The generation that began the war is disappearing. And another generation is growing up. Imagine someone born in 1618. They are now in their 20s. They may have married. They may have children. They may never have known a Europe without war. This person may have seen several rulers, several armies, several changes in political power. And perhaps they are tired, very tired, not only physically, but emotionally. They want stability. They want to know what tomorrow will look like. They want to rebuild. They want to plant crops without fear. They want to travel without worrying about soldiers. They want to sleep without listening for horses outside. This desire for peace is becoming stronger. and that desire will eventually bring diplomats together. But before peace arrives, there is still more fighting. The 1640s are not peaceful. Sweden continues its campaigns. France continues fighting. Spain continues fighting. The emperor continues resisting. Armies move across the German lands. But something is changing. The war is no longer driven by the same energy as it had been in the beginning. There is less hope of a simple victory. The conflict has become too large, too expensive, too complicated. Everyone understands that some kind of settlement will eventually be necessary. The question is how? Who will negotiate? Where will they meet? What will they discuss? What territories will change hands? What will happen to religious rights? What will happen to the German princes? What will happen to the emperor? What will happen to Sweden? What will happen to France? And what will happen to ordinary people? These questions will take years to answer. But the first steps toward a great peace conference are being prepared. Two cities will become especially important: Münster and Osnabrück. They are not royal capitals. They are not giant cities. But they will become the setting for one of the most important diplomatic gatherings in European history. Imagine arriving in one of these cities. The roads are busy. Messengers arrive. Diplomats arrive. Servants arrive. Officials arrive. Horses fill the streets. Carriages move slowly. Letters are carried from one house to another. Rooms are rented. Houses are prepared. People begin discussing where negotiations will take place. The war is still being fought, but peace talks are beginning. This creates a strange situation. Imagine a battlefield only a few hundred miles away. Soldiers are still fighting, and at the same time, diplomats are sitting around tables discussing peace. One side wants one thing. Another side wants something different. They argue. They write. They wait. They send messages. They consult their rulers. Then they return. The process is slow. Very slow. But peace itself is often slow. It is easier to begin a war than to end one. Beginning a war may require one decision. Ending a long war requires many people to agree. And that is exactly what Europe now faces. As the night grows quiet, let us return to the countryside one last time. Imagine a field in the early 1640s. The wheat is moving in the wind. A farmer walks slowly between the rows. He checks the crop. He thinks about the coming harvest. His children are nearby. Perhaps they are carrying baskets. The road is empty. No soldiers today. The sky is wide. The morning is peaceful. Maybe this farmer has heard about the peace talks. Maybe he has not. Perhaps he knows only that the fighting seems less constant. Perhaps he hopes. Hope can be very small. It can be as simple as planting a seed. You put it into the earth without knowing exactly what the future will bring. You wait. You care for it. You trust that the season will come. And perhaps peace is like that. A possibility planted quietly. Not yet visible, but growing. The 30 Years' War has entered its final years. The old leaders are disappearing. The old alliances are changing. The people are tired. The diplomats are gathering. And the idea of a settlement is becoming more real. Soon, we will enter the world of Münster and Osnabrück. We will meet the diplomats. We will see how slowly they work. We will listen to the arguments. We will follow the long path toward the treaties that finally bring the war to an end. But before that, take a moment. Let the old countryside become still. The field is quiet. The house is warm. The family is sleeping. The road is empty. No army is passing. No cannon is sounding. There is only the soft movement of the wind. And after 30 years of uncertainty, perhaps this quietness begins to feel like something precious. Peace is not here yet, but people are beginning to imagine it. They are beginning to believe that the long war might finally end. So tonight, we will leave the countryside under the stars. The diplomats are gathering. The letters are moving. The tables are being prepared. The great negotiations are approaching. And the long road toward 1648 has begun. Take a slow breath. Let the 17th century world become quiet around you. The armies can wait. The diplomats can wait. History can wait. For now, there is only the night, and the gentle sound of a world hopping for peace. The night is quiet. The long roads of Europe stretch beneath the stars. For almost 30 years, armies have moved across them. Soldiers have marched. Wagons have rolled. Horses have carried messengers. Merchants have changed their routes. Families have left their homes. And now, slowly, another kind of movement is beginning. Diplomats are traveling, not to prepare for another battle, not to gather soldiers, but to talk about peace. Tonight, we will follow those diplomats. We will travel to two cities in the German lands, Münster and Osnabrück. These two cities will become the setting for the negotiations that eventually bring the 30 Years' War to an end. But peace will not arrive quickly. There will be arguments. There will be delays. There will be misunderstandings. There will be letters. There will be meetings. And there will be many moments when people wonder whether peace is really possible. So let us take a slow walk toward these cities. Imagine traveling through Europe in the 1640s. The roads are still rough. The journey is slow. A carriage moves carefully over uneven ground. The horses become tired. At an inn, travelers stop for food. Someone brings water for the horses. A servant carries luggage inside. A messenger arrives with a letter. Then, after resting, the journey begins again. A diplomat might travel for weeks, perhaps even months. And every journey carries uncertainty. There may be checkpoints. There may be soldiers. There may be damaged bridges. There may be poor roads. But the destination is important. Peace talks are coming. The city of Münster lies in the western part of the German lands. It is an old city. Its streets are narrow. Its buildings are made of stone and timber. Church towers rise above the rooftops. Markets fill some streets during the day. Merchants sell cloth. Food is carried through the markets. Horses move between carts. People gather outside churches. It is a city with an ordinary rhythm. But during the peace negotiations, Münster becomes something more. It becomes a meeting place for Europe. Diplomats arrive from different countries. Officials arrive. Servants arrive. Lawyers arrive. Secretaries arrive. Messengers arrive. And suddenly, houses that were once quiet become temporary diplomatic offices. Letters are written late into the night. Documents are copied. Seals are pressed into wax. Messages are sent to rulers far away. The city becomes busy with words. And across the region, another city is preparing. Osnabrück. Osnabrück is smaller, but it is also important. The negotiations are divided between the two cities partly because religious differences make it difficult for all parties to meet in one place. Catholic and Protestant representatives can negotiate in different settings. This may seem like a small detail, but it tells us something about the world of the time. Religion still matters. Even after decades of political conflict, religious identity remains important. The diplomats have to think about religion carefully. They have to think about political power. They have to think about territory. They have to think about trade. They have to think about legal rights. And they have to think about how to prevent another war. This is a huge task. Imagine sitting at a wooden table. A diplomat has several documents in front of him. One concerns territory. Another concerns religion. Another concerns money. Another concerns a ruler's rights. He reads carefully. His secretary waits. The diplomat speaks slowly. The secretary writes. Then another diplomat responds. More writing. More discussion. The process continues. There is no television. No telephone. No instant message. No modern conference center. Everything moves through people. A letter must be carried. A document must be copied. A decision must be approved by a distant ruler. And so negotiations take time. A great deal of time. The Peace of Westphalia is not one simple meeting. It is a collection of negotiations and treaties. The process takes years. The diplomats do not simply sit down one morning and finish the war. They work slowly. They bargain. They disagree. They wait. And while they negotiate, armies are still fighting. This is important. The peace talks do not immediately stop the war. The fighting continues. Armies still move. Cities are still occupied. People are still paying taxes. The diplomats know that military events can change the balance at the negotiating table. So every battle matters. Every new alliance matters. Every victory matters. And every defeat matters. The diplomats watch the war even while discussing how to end it. Imagine a messenger arriving in Münster. His horse is tired. His clothes are dusty. He carries a sealed letter. He enters a building. A secretary opens the door. The letter is delivered. It contains news from a battlefield. The diplomats read it. The room becomes quiet. They understand that this news may change the negotiations. Another letter is written. Another messenger prepares to leave. The process continues. War and diplomacy move together. Now let us think about the people living in Münster. Their city has changed because of the negotiations. There are more visitors, more horses, more servants, more merchants. More food is needed. More rooms are needed. More houses are rented. People who provide services may earn money. Innkeepers may become busy. Carriage owners may find more work. Food sellers may have more customers. Tailors may receive new orders. Diplomatic gatherings can bring economic opportunities. For some people, peace negotiations are good for business. For others, the city becomes crowded. There are new demands. More noise. More activity. More foreign languages. Imagine walking through a street in Münster. You hear German, then French, then Spanish, then Italian, then other languages. A diplomat passes. A servant carries a package. A merchant pushes a cart. A horse moves between people. The city feels different. Europe has come to town. And yet, just outside the city, ordinary life continues. Farmers still work fields. Children still play. People still attend church. The contrast is interesting. The greatest political questions in Europe are being discussed inside rooms. Outside, people still worry about bread. This difference never disappears. Now let us move into one of the most difficult questions facing the diplomats. What happens to religion? The war began partly because of religious conflict. The Peace of Augsburg had not solved everything. The 30 Years' War had shown how dangerous religious disagreement could become when combined with political power. So the diplomats needed a new settlement. Catholics wanted protection. Lutherans wanted protection. Calvinists wanted protection. Territories needed rules. Church property needed rules. Political rights needed rules. The final settlement would recognize important religious arrangements. It would also confirm the rights of different Christian traditions in the empire. This was a major change. But it was not simply about religion. Territory was just as important. France wanted gains. Sweden wanted gains. The German princes wanted more security and greater political independence. The emperor wanted to preserve his position. Spain had its own interests. The Dutch wanted recognition of their independence. Many different pieces had to fit together. Imagine a large table covered with maps. One map shows the German lands. Another shows France. Another shows the Netherlands. Another shows the Baltic region. Lines are drawn. Names are written. Borders are discussed. A diplomat points to a town. Another diplomat disagrees. A third person writes something down. They move a document. They consult a map. They wait for instructions. The process repeats. For years, this is the slow machinery of peace. Now let us leave the diplomats for a moment. Imagine a village somewhere in Germany. The year is 1645. A family is standing beside a field. The war has lasted for 27 years. The oldest people in the village remember the beginning. The youngest people know only the war. A farmer looks at the field. It is damaged, but it is growing again. The family has fewer animals than before, but they have some. The house has been repaired. A roof was damaged years ago. It has been fixed. The family has survived. That word matters. Survived. Not prospered. Not become wealthy. Simply survived. And now there are rumors that peace may be coming. Perhaps someone heard it at the market. Perhaps a merchant mentioned negotiations. Perhaps a traveling priest spoke about it. Perhaps nobody knows whether the rumor is true. But hope begins to appear. A quiet hope. The kind of hope that people are afraid to trust. Because they have heard promises before. They have seen armies return before. They have seen peace negotiations fail before. So they wait. And they continue working. This is what life often looks like near the end of a long war. People do not stop living while waiting for peace. They plant. They harvest. They marry. They build. They repair. They raise children. They simply hope that the future will be gentler. Now let us return to the diplomats. The negotiations are becoming more serious. The major powers are beginning to understand that no single side can completely defeat all the others. The war has become too expensive. The political map is too complicated. A total victory is increasingly difficult. So compromise becomes necessary. This does not mean everyone becomes friendly. They do not. They simply realize that continued fighting has a price. Sometimes peace begins when people become tired. Very tired. Tired enough to accept a settlement that is not perfect. The diplomats discuss territorial changes. France gains important territories. Sweden gains territory and influence around the Baltic and northern Germany. The Dutch Republic receives formal recognition of its independence from Spain. The German princes gain greater freedom to conduct aspects of their own foreign relations. The emperor remains emperor, but his authority inside the empire is more limited. The religious settlement becomes more inclusive. The political structure of the Holy Roman Empire remains, but it has changed. The Peace of Westphalia will not create a modern Europe overnight. That would be too simple. But it does establish important principles. It confirms the political importance of individual states and territories. It strengthens the ability of rulers to govern their own lands. And it creates a new balance. Europe will continue changing. But the 30 Years' War is approaching its end. Still, the final agreements take time. And while diplomats talk, battles continue. This is perhaps one of the strangest parts of the whole story. Imagine a diplomat sitting at a desk. He is discussing how to stop a war. At the same time, somewhere far away, soldiers are fighting. The diplomat receives a letter. The letter describes another battle. He reads it. Then he returns to the negotiation. The war continues. The peace talks continue. Both are happening at once. And slowly the balance shifts toward peace. By the middle of the 1640s, many people are exhausted. France is tired. Spain is tired. Sweden is tired. The German lands are tired. The emperor is tired. And ordinary people are perhaps the most tired of all. A generation has grown up. Entire communities have changed. Some villages have disappeared. Some towns have been rebuilt. Some families have moved. Some people have never returned. And yet people still hope. Hope is often strongest when everything else is uncertain. Imagine a child standing beside a church. The child has heard adults speak about war all their life. But perhaps now the child hears a different word. Peace. The child may not understand what it means. But the adults do. Peace means no soldiers. Peace means safer roads. Peace means lower pressure on food. Peace means rebuilding. Peace means planting crops without fear. Peace means sleeping more easily. Peace means the possibility of a future. And perhaps that is why peace becomes such a powerful idea. Not because it is grand, but because it is ordinary. Peace is being able to close your door at night without wondering who is outside. Peace is being able to walk to the market. Peace is hearing church bells without wondering whether they are warning you. Peace is seeing your children play without thinking about the next army. These are small things. But after 30 years, small things become precious. Now the negotiations continue. Münster remains busy. Osnabrück remains busy. Messengers travel between the two cities. Documents are exchanged. Diplomats meet. Arguments continue. Some issues are solved. Others take longer. Some decisions require approval from rulers far away. Weeks become months. Months become years. And then, finally, the pieces begin to come together. The year 1648 approaches. Europe is ready. Not completely peaceful. Not completely healed. But ready. The final treaties are being prepared. The Great War that began with the Prague Rebellion is nearing its end. The armies have spent decades moving across Europe. The diplomats have spent years moving between rooms. And ordinary people have spent a generation waiting. Soon the waiting will be over. But before we reach the final moment, let us take one more slow walk through Münster. It is evening. The streets are quieter now. The shops are closing. A baker is putting away his tools. A merchant counts the day's money. A horse stands beside a carriage. A servant carries a lantern. The church bells ring softly. Inside a large house, diplomats are still talking. Papers cover the tables. Candles burn. A secretary writes. Someone reads a document aloud. Another person listens carefully. Outside, ordinary people are going home. Perhaps they do not understand every detail of the negotiations. Perhaps they only know that something important is happening. They know that people from distant countries have gathered. They know that letters are constantly arriving. They know that the war may finally be ending. And perhaps that is enough. The city becomes quiet. The lanterns glow. The streets become empty. The night settles over Münster. And the long war is slowly approaching its final page. As the night grows quiet, let us pause here. We have followed this story for many years. We have seen kings rise and fall. We have seen armies cross borders. We have seen cities attacked. We have seen soldiers march. We have seen farmers wait. We have seen families adapt. And now, after nearly 3 decades, Europe is preparing to close this chapter. The final treaties will be signed in 1648. But the meaning of those treaties will last much longer. They will change the political balance of Europe. They will influence ideas about sovereignty. They will help shape the future of international diplomacy. And they will mark the end of one of the longest wars of early modern Europe. But tonight, we will not rush to the signature. Let us leave the diplomats for a moment. Let us return to the countryside. Imagine a field beneath the evening sky. The crops are moving gently in the wind. A farmer stands beside a wooden fence. He looks toward the road. Nothing is moving. No soldiers. No wagons. No army. Only a traveler walking in the distance. The farmer watches. Then he turns back toward his home. The door is open. A warm light shines from inside. His family is waiting. For the first time in many years, perhaps the road feels like a road again. Not a military route. Not a path for armies. Just a road. A simple road leading home. And perhaps this is the best place to pause. The 30 Years' War is almost over. The cities of peace are still filled with diplomats. The final agreements are close. The future is beginning to open. And after so many years of war, Europe is preparing to breathe. Take a slow breath. Let your mind rest. Let the 17th century countryside become quiet. The fields are still. The houses are warm. The roads are empty. And somewhere in Münster and Osnabrück, the final words are being written. The next chapter will bring us to 1648. The treaties will be signed. The armies will finally begin to withdraw. And the people of Europe will discover what peace looks like after 30 years of war. For now, let the night remain gentle. The long journey is almost complete. The night is quiet. Very quiet. The roads of Europe stretch beneath the dark sky. The fields are still. The villages are resting. And in the towns of Münster and Osnabrück, candles are still burning inside rooms where diplomats have been working for years. Tonight, we arrive at one of the most important moments in our long journey. The year is 1648. 30 years have passed since the war began. 30 years. A whole generation. Children who were born when the first fighting began are now adults. Some have children of their own. Some people have spent their entire lives knowing only war. And now, slowly, the war is coming to an end. But peace is not a single moment. It is a process. It is made from many conversations. Many letters, many compromises, many small decisions, and sometimes many disappointments. So tonight we will take our time. We will walk slowly through the final year of the 30 Years' War. We will listen to the diplomats. We will look at the cities. We will think about the people waiting for peace. And we will finally reach the treaties that became known as the Peace of Westphalia. Imagine Münster in 1648. The city is awake. There are diplomats everywhere. Servants move through the streets. Carriages arrive. Horses stand outside buildings. Letters are carried from one house to another. Messengers wait for instructions. The city has become a temporary home for people from across Europe. There are representatives of the emperor, representatives of France, representatives of Sweden, representatives of German territories, representatives of other powers. Everyone has something they want. Everyone has something they fear. Everyone wants the best possible result. And yet everyone understands one thing. The war cannot continue forever. For years, the diplomats have been discussing the same basic questions. Who controls which land? Who has which rights? Which religion is protected? What happens to church property? What happens to the German princes? What happens to the emperor? What happens to Sweden? What happens to France? What happens to Spain? And perhaps the most difficult question of all, how can Europe prevent another war like this? There is no simple answer. The Holy Roman Empire is not one simple country. It is a vast collection of territories. There are duchies, principalities, free cities, kingdoms, church territories, small states, large states. Each has its own ruler. Each has its own interests. Some rulers are Catholic. Some are Lutheran. Some are Calvinist. Some are closely connected to the emperor. Others want more independence. The peace must somehow fit all of these pieces together. Imagine a large table. Maps cover its surface. Small pieces of paper are placed over towns and territories. Names are written in ink. A diplomat points to a border. Another diplomat shakes his head. A third person makes a note. The discussion continues. There is no shouting. At least not always. There is often something slower. Careful disagreement. One person says that a certain territory should belong to one ruler. Another says it should belong to someone else. A third person suggests a compromise. The first person sends a letter to his government. Then everyone waits. Days pass. Perhaps weeks. Eventually an answer arrives. The conversation begins again. This is how peace is made. Slowly, patiently, sometimes painfully. The diplomats are not fighting with swords. They are fighting with words. And words can also take time. Now outside the negotiating rooms, life continues. A baker wakes before sunrise. He prepares dough. The oven becomes warm. Bread is made. A merchant opens his shop. A tailor begins work. A servant carries water. A horse is fed. Children walk through the streets. Church bells ring. The city has become busy because of the peace negotiations. And for some local people, the diplomats have become familiar faces. They see them walking through the streets. They see their servants. They see their carriages. They hear foreign languages. The great political drama is taking place around ordinary life. This is one of the beautiful things about historical places. The people who lived there did not know that history would later remember their streets. For them, it was simply home. Now let us move beyond Münster. Travel slowly toward Osnabrück. The road is quiet. The countryside is green in places. Farmers are working. The war has damaged many regions. But life is returning. Some houses have been rebuilt. Some fields are being cultivated again. People are repairing what they can. A broken wall is rebuilt. A roof is repaired. A bridge is fixed. A field is cleared. This is the beginning of recovery. Not complete recovery. Not yet. But the first signs. And these signs matter. Because peace is not only a document. Peace must eventually become visible. It must appear in roads, in markets, in farms, in homes, in churches, in schools, in families. The diplomats can sign a treaty, but ordinary people must live it. Now, in 1648, several major agreements are coming together. The treaties connected with the Peace of Westphalia include agreements between the Emperor and Sweden, and between the Emperor and France. There are also arrangements involving the German territories. The Dutch Republic receives formal recognition of its independence from Spain through a separate treaty concluded at Münster. The war is ending through a group of agreements rather than one simple piece of paper. This is why historians speak of the Peace of Westphalia. It is a whole settlement, a collection of decisions, a new political arrangement, a moment when Europe tries to reorganize itself after decades of conflict. One important issue is religion. The peace confirms a broader religious settlement within the empire. Catholics remain protected. Lutherans remain protected. Calvinists receive formal recognition as well. This matters because Calvinists had not been included in the older Peace of Augsburg in the same way. Now they have a recognized place in the religious settlement. The agreements also address the status of church property and religious rights. The goal is not to make everyone believe the same thing. Instead, the settlement tries to create rules for living with religious differences. That is a major change. Europe does not suddenly become tolerant in the modern sense. Religious disagreements continue. Conflicts continue in other places. But the peace creates a legal and political framework that is more workable. It accepts that different Christian communities can exist within the empire. This is important because the war had shown what could happen when religious disagreement became tied to political power. Now let us think about the German princes. For decades, they had been caught between the emperor and foreign powers. The peace gives them important rights. They can have greater freedom in their political relationships. They retain their territories. Their political importance becomes clearer. The Holy Roman Empire continues to exist. The emperor does not disappear, but the empire becomes a more decentralized political structure. The individual territories have significant power. Imagine looking at a map of the empire. There is no single solid block. Instead, there are many pieces. Some are large. Some are tiny. Some are separated by other territories. Rivers run through them. Roads cross them. Cities stand among them. The political map is complicated, but that complexity becomes part of the new European balance. France gains important territories. Sweden gains territories and influence. The Dutch Republic gains formal recognition of its independence from Spain. Spain's position is weakened. The Habsburg Emperor remains powerful, but not as powerful as he might have hoped at the beginning of the war. The balance has changed, and this balance will shape European politics for generations. Now imagine the moment when the final agreements are being prepared. A document lies on a table. The paper is carefully written. Names are included. Territories are described. Rights are listed. Promises are recorded. The diplomats read the text. They check the language. They compare it with previous agreements. They make sure that nothing important has been forgotten. Then comes the final stage. Signatures, seals, official approval. The process is formal. It is careful. It is serious. And when the agreements are finally completed, something remarkable has happened. The 30 Years' War is over. A war that began in 1618 has reached its end. 30 years. The number itself feels enormous. For many people, the war had become normal. Now it is finished. But how does peace feel? Perhaps it does not feel dramatic. There may be no great moment when everyone suddenly celebrates. No single bell announces that the entire continent is safe. Instead, peace arrives gradually. An army leaves. A road becomes safer. A market opens. A family returns. A field is planted. A tax is reduced. A wall is repaired. A traveler goes from one town to another without fear. These are the real signs. Peace is often quiet. Now imagine a village in late 1648. The sun is setting. A farmer is standing beside his field. He looks toward the road. A small group of travelers passes. They are not soldiers. They are merchants. The farmer watches them. The road is open. Nobody stops them. Nobody demands food. Nobody takes their horses. They simply continue. The farmer turns back toward his home. His wife is waiting. His children are nearby. Dinner is being prepared. The evening is calm. Perhaps nobody says anything about the peace treaty. They simply enjoy the quiet. And that quiet is the result of many years of suffering and negotiation. Now think about a child born in 1648. This child enters a different Europe. Not a peaceful Europe in every sense. Wars will happen again. Europe will never become permanently calm. But this child will not grow up in the 30 Years' War. That chapter is finished. The child will hear stories about it. Grandparents will remember. Old soldiers will talk. Villages will have stories about what happened. But the war itself is over. And memory begins. Memory is an important part of history. People remember battles. They remember leaders. They remember destruction. They remember lost relatives. They remember hunger. They remember journeys. They remember the years when soldiers arrived. But they also remember survival. A family that remained together. A house that was rebuilt. A field that was planted again. A church bell that rang again. A market that reopened. These memories become part of local history. The 30 Years' War leaves a deep mark on Europe. The population of some regions has fallen sharply. Some areas suffer enormous losses. The exact numbers are difficult to know. Records from the period are incomplete. Different regions experience very different levels of destruction. Some places recover quickly. Others take generations. But the overall impact is enormous. War has destroyed wealth. It has disrupted trade. It has damaged farms. It has weakened communities. It has caused migration. It has changed political power. And it has left emotional scars. Yet Europe begins to rebuild. Slowly, very slowly. Farmers return to fields. Buildings are repaired. Markets reopen. Roads become safer. Population begins to recover in many regions. Children grow up. New generations arrive. The world moves forward. Now let us return to the great diplomatic cities. Münster and Osnabrück are quieter. The foreign visitors begin to leave. Carriages move away. Horses travel along the roads. Servants pack belongings. Documents are secured. Diplomats return home. The city begins to return to ordinary life. Imagine a room that had been used for negotiations. The table is still there. Perhaps candles remain. Papers are gone. The chairs are empty. The room is quiet. A person enters. They look around. For years, this room had been filled with discussions about war and peace. Now it is empty. The silence feels different. It is not the silence of fear. It is the silence after work is finished. The great negotiation is over. The people can go home. And Europe can begin to rebuild. The Peace of Westphalia is often remembered as a major moment in the development of the modern international system. The idea is sometimes presented very simply. States are sovereign. Each state has authority over its own territory. Foreign powers should not simply interfere whenever they wish. These ideas did not suddenly appear in 1648. They had older roots. And the Peace of Westphalia did not create the modern state system all by itself. History is rarely that simple. But the settlements of 1648 did help strengthen a political order based on territorial authority and negotiated agreements. They showed that large international conflicts could be addressed through diplomacy. They showed that many different powers could sit together and create a settlement. And they showed that peace could be built through compromise. The legacy would continue. European rulers would remember the settlement. Diplomats would study it. Later historians would debate its meaning. The word Westphalian would eventually become associated with ideas about sovereignty. But for the people of 1648, perhaps the most important meaning was much simpler. The war had ended. That was enough. Now imagine the countryside at night. The fields are dark. The sky is full of stars. A farmhouse stands quietly in the distance. Inside, a family is sleeping. There are no soldiers outside. No army is passing. The road is quiet. A dog moves near the doorway. The fire inside the house is becoming smaller. The family has survived. And tomorrow they will wake up. They will work. They will eat. They will repair. They will live. This is the true beginning of peace. Not the signature. Not the treaty. But tomorrow morning. The morning when people begin living without expecting the next army. The morning when a farmer can look at his field and think about the harvest rather than the soldiers. The morning when a child can walk down the road without fear. The morning when merchants can travel. The morning when bells can ring simply because it is Sunday. These ordinary moments are what peace means. And perhaps that is why the end of the 30 Years' War deserves to be remembered quietly. Not as a dramatic ending, but as a long exhale. A breath held for 30 years. Finally released. Take a slow breath now. Imagine that old European countryside. The war is finished. The armies are leaving. The diplomats are returning home. The roads are opening. The fields are being planted again. The cities are becoming ordinary once more. The great struggle has ended. But the story of its consequences is only beginning. Because peace does not erase what happened. It leaves memories. It leaves political changes. It leaves damaged buildings. It leaves empty spaces in families. It leaves new borders. It leaves new ideas. And it leaves a Europe that is different from the Europe of 1618. The Holy Roman Empire still exists. The Habsburgs still rule. France has become stronger. Sweden has gained influence. The Dutch Republic has secured recognition. And the German lands remain divided into many territories. Europe has changed. But perhaps the most important change is invisible. People now know what 30 years of war can do. They know how quickly political disputes can grow. They know how deeply armies can affect ordinary life. They know how difficult peace can be. And perhaps this memory will influence future generations. Not always enough to prevent war, but enough to make diplomacy more important. Enough to make negotiation part of the European political tradition. Enough to remind rulers that victory has a price. Now let us slowly leave the year 1648. The road behind us is very long. We began with a window in Prague. A small moment. A group of angry men. A political dispute. A dangerous act. And from that moment, Europe entered a conflict that would last 30 years. We followed kings. We followed soldiers. We followed diplomats. But most of all, we followed ordinary people. Farmers, merchants, children, families, travelers, people who rarely appear in grand history books. They are the ones who lived through the war. And they are the ones who waited for peace. Now the night is deeper. The fields are quiet. The houses are dark. The roads are empty. The 30 Years' War has ended. And perhaps, after such a long journey, we should allow ourselves a moment of silence. No more marching. No more political arguments. No more distant cannon. Only the wind. Only the fields. Only the quiet night. Imagine the first peaceful morning after the war. The sun rises slowly. Light touches the rooftops. Smoke rises from chimneys. A farmer opens his door. A child steps outside. Birds move through the trees. A cart travels down the road. The farmer watches it pass. He does not need to worry. It is simply a cart. The world feels ordinary. And ordinary is beautiful. After 30 years of war, ordinary life has become precious. A warm meal. A safe road. A repaired roof. A growing field. A family together. A quiet night. These things are not small. They are the foundation of peace. So as we close this chapter, let the old world become quiet. Let the candles fade. Let the diplomats leave Münster and Osnabrück. Let the armies disappear beyond the horizon. Let the fields grow green again. And let the people sleep. The 30 Years' War is over. But history continues. Europe will face new wars. New rulers will rise. New borders will appear. New political ideas will develop. The world will change. But 1648 will remain an important point on the road. A reminder that even after decades of conflict, people can eventually sit down together. They can speak. They can argue. They can compromise. And they can build a peace. Not a perfect peace. Not a permanent peace. But a peace. And sometimes, after 30 years of war, that is enough. So now take another slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the old roads fade into darkness. The horses are resting. The markets are quiet. The fields are still. The candles are going out. And somewhere in the German countryside, a family is sleeping safely in their home. For the first time in a very long time. Tomorrow does not belong to an army. Tomorrow belongs to them. Good night, and let the peaceful fields of 1648 remain quiet until morning. The night is quiet again. The Great War is over. The treaties have been signed. The diplomats have gone home. The armies are beginning to leave the German lands. And across Europe, people are slowly waking to a strange new feeling. Peace. Not perfect peace. Not permanent peace. But peace after 30 years of war. Tonight, we will not rush into another battle. There is no need. Instead, we will take a slow walk through the world that remained after the 30 Years' War. Because ending a war does not mean everything suddenly becomes normal. The fighting can stop in a day, but rebuilding can take years, sometimes generations. A broken bridge does not repair itself because a treaty has been signed. A field does not immediately produce a harvest. A family does not suddenly forget the people it lost. A town does not instantly recover its population. Peace is only the beginning of another long journey. So imagine yourself standing in a German village sometime after 1648. The sun is low. The evening air is cool. The fields are quiet. There is a small house beside the road. Its walls have been repaired. Its roof is newer than the rest of the building. A wooden fence stands around the garden. Inside, a family is preparing dinner. There is bread. There may be soup. Perhaps there are vegetables from the garden. The meal is simple, but the family is together. And outside, the road is empty. No army is coming. That empty road is one of the greatest changes. For decades, roads had carried soldiers. Now they can carry merchants, travelers, farmers, letters, families. Life can begin moving in a different way. Imagine a merchant preparing his wagon. He checks the wheels. He loads cloth. He adds small barrels of food. He secures the bags. He speaks with his driver. Then they leave. The journey may still be difficult. The roads are still rough. There are still thieves. There are still local taxes. But there is no great army blocking the road. The merchant can plan. He can think about the next town, the next market, the next sale. This ability to plan is important. War destroys planning. Peace restores it. A farmer can plan next year's crop. A merchant can plan a journey. A family can plan a marriage. A town can plan repairs. A ruler can plan taxes. A child can plan for the future. Peace gives time back to people. And time is precious. Now imagine a field. During the war, it may have been neglected. Perhaps the farmer was forced to leave. Perhaps soldiers passed through. Perhaps animals destroyed part of the crop. Now the farmer returns. He looks at the soil. He removes stones. He repairs the fence. He plants seeds. The work is slow. There is no dramatic moment. Just a person working. One day. Then another. Then another. This is how recovery happens. Quietly, piece by piece, the countryside begins to change. Fields return to cultivation. Animals become more common. Houses are repaired. Markets become busier. Population begins to recover in many places. But recovery is not equal. Some regions suffered much more than others. Some villages lost large parts of their populations. Some towns were heavily damaged. Some places had been repeatedly occupied by armies. Other regions were less affected. The war did not leave one identical mark across Europe. Each community carried its own story. Imagine, too, villages only a few days apart. The first village was on a major military road. Armies passed through many times. Its barns were emptied. Its houses were damaged. Many people left. The second village was farther away from the main routes. It suffered less. Its fields remained productive. Its population stayed larger. After the war, the two villages would recover differently. One might need decades. The other might return to normal much sooner. This is why the history of the 30 Years' War can never be reduced to one number. One death toll. One destroyed town. One simple story. The experience varied from place to place. Now let us think about the political world. The Peace of Westphalia changed the balance of Europe. The emperor remained. The Holy Roman Empire remained. But the German territories retained strong political rights. The empire remained a collection of many states and territories. There was no single central government controlling everything. Instead, political power was divided. This would shape German history for a very long time. The many German states would continue to exist. Some would grow stronger. Some would remain small. Some would eventually disappear. But the political structure created in this period would influence European history for generations. France emerged stronger. Its position in Europe became more important. Sweden also gained influence. The Dutch Republic gained formal recognition as an independent state. Spain's long struggle continued, and the Habsburg family remained powerful. Europe had not become peaceful forever, but the balance had changed. The 30 Years' War had helped create a new political landscape. Now imagine a map. There are borders everywhere. Some are long. Some are short. Some follow rivers. Some cross forests. Some are almost impossible to see on the ground. A traveler may cross from one territory into another without noticing much difference. Perhaps a sign changes. Perhaps a tax must be paid. Perhaps a new official appears. Perhaps the local ruler's symbol is displayed. The political world is divided, and that division becomes one of the defining features of Central Europe. Now let us return to ordinary life. Imagine a small town. The market square is beginning to fill. A farmer brings vegetables. A baker brings bread. A butcher prepares meat. A cloth merchant opens his stall. A blacksmith displays tools. Children move through the crowd. People talk. Prices are discussed. A traveler asks for directions. This sounds simple, but a market is a sign of stability. Markets need trust. They need roads. They need customers. They need sellers. They need food. They need people who believe they can return home safely. During war, markets can collapse. After war, they slowly return. And with them comes ordinary economic life. Money begins circulating again. Craft workers find more customers. Merchants travel farther. Farmers produce more. Towns begin to grow. It takes time, but the process begins. Now think about education. War had disrupted schools in many places. Some teachers had left. Some buildings had been damaged. Some families could not afford education. But after peace, schools could begin to recover. Children could return to learning. They could study reading, writing, religion, arithmetic, history, Latin. For wealthy families, education remained especially important. Universities also continued to exist. The intellectual world of Europe did not stop during the war. Scholars continued writing. Scientists continued observing nature. Artists continued working. Books continued to be printed. The war did not freeze civilization. Life continued. People continued thinking. And this is important to remember. Even during terrible periods, human beings continue creating. They continue writing. They continue building. They continue teaching. They continue making music. They continue telling stories. The world never completely stops. Now imagine an old church after the war. The building has survived. Perhaps some windows were broken. Perhaps the roof needed repair. The walls are darkened by age. Inside, candles burn. People gather. A child is baptized. A couple is married. A funeral is held. A service is celebrated. The church becomes part of the rebuilding. Religion remains deeply important. The war had not erased religious differences. Catholics remained Catholics. Lutherans remained Lutherans. Calvinists remained Calvinists. But now there was a political settlement that recognized these different traditions more clearly. People still disagreed. But there were rules. And rules can make disagreement safer. This is one of the important lessons of the settlement. Peace does not always mean everyone agrees. Sometimes peace means people agree on how to disagree. That idea would become very important in European politics. Now let us think about memory. The war had lasted so long that many people had stories. An old soldier might remember Lutzen. Another might remember Breitenfeld. Someone else might remember the arrival of Swedish troops. A family might remember hiding in a cellar. A village might remember a winter when soldiers took their animals. A city might remember a siege. These memories were passed down. From parents to children. From grandparents to grandchildren. Some stories became legends. Some details became uncertain. But the memory remained. Imagine an old man sitting near a fireplace. His grandchildren are listening. He tells them about the war. He was young then. He remembers marching. He remembers cold nights. He remembers hunger. He remembers roads. He remembers soldiers. The children listen. To them, the war is history. To him, it is memory. That difference is powerful. The old man remembers what it felt like. The children only imagine it. As the years pass, the old generation disappears. The children become adults. The grandchildren grow old. And the war moves farther into the past. But it never completely disappears. It remains in documents, in churches, in ruins, in family stories, in political borders, in books, and in the memory of Europe. Now let us think about the military world. The war had changed the way European rulers thought about armies. Large armies required money. They required administration. They required supply systems. They required trained officers. They required weapons. They required transportation. Governments learned from these experiences. The ability to organize armies became increasingly important. States that could collect taxes effectively could support larger military forces. States that could manage supplies could fight longer. This contributed to the growth of stronger governments. The 17th century would see many rulers trying to centralize power. France is an important example. Its monarchy would become increasingly powerful. Later, under Louis XIV, France would become one of Europe's strongest states. The experience of the 30 Years' War helped create the political environment in which this happened. Sweden also became a major power for a time. The Swedish state had developed strong military and administrative systems. Its influence around the Baltic grew. The Dutch Republic became a major commercial power. Spain remained important but faced growing challenges. The Habsburgs continued to rule large territories. Europe was becoming a balance of competing powers. No single ruler could easily dominate the entire continent. And this balance would shape European history. Now imagine Europe as a large table. Different rulers sit around it. France, Spain, Sweden, Austria, the Dutch Republic, England, and many German states. Each has its own interests. Each watches the others. If one becomes too strong, others may cooperate against it. If one becomes weak, another may gain influence. Diplomacy becomes increasingly important. Ambassadors travel. Letters are exchanged. Treaties are signed. Marriages are arranged. Trade agreements are made. The world becomes more connected. And war remains possible. The Peace of Westphalia does not create permanent peace. That is important. There will be many more wars. France will fight Spain. France will fight other European powers. Sweden will fight again. England will become deeply involved in continental politics. The Ottoman Empire will remain a major power. Russia will rise. Prussia will rise. The European balance will continue changing. But 1648 becomes one important point in this larger story. A moment when a generation of war finally ended. Now let us return to the people. Imagine a young woman in a village. She was born near the end of the war. Her parents remember the difficult years. They tell her stories. But she grows up in peace. She learns to farm. She helps her mother. She marries. She has children. Her children grow up without seeing armies on the road. They hear stories from older relatives. But their childhood is different. This is how peace changes generations. The first generation remembers war. The next generation remembers the stories. The third generation may remember only the memory. Eventually, the war becomes something people study. Something written in books. Something discussed by scholars. But its effects remain. Now imagine the same village many years later. The old damaged buildings are gone. New houses stand where they once stood. The fields are larger. The road is busier. Children are playing. A market is taking place. Nobody alive remembers the first soldiers who passed through. But the village exists partly because people rebuilt it. That is another quiet truth of history. People rebuild. Again and again. After wars. After fires. After floods. After disasters. They rebuild homes. They rebuild markets. They rebuild communities. They plant again. They marry again. They raise children again. Life is stubborn. It continues. And after the 30 Years' War, Europe begins that process. Now let us return to the diplomats one final time. They have gone home. Their papers are stored. Their agreements have been delivered to rulers. The cities are quieter. But the ideas discussed there continue traveling. The principle that political disputes can be settled through negotiation becomes increasingly important. The idea that rulers have authority within their own territories becomes more significant. The idea that religion and political power need clear rules becomes more accepted. These ideas are not perfect. They do not solve every conflict, but they influence the future. And that is one reason 1648 is remembered. Not because the world suddenly became modern, but because the settlement became part of the long development of European diplomacy. Now, as we slowly move toward the end of this chapter, let us imagine one final evening. The sun is setting over the German countryside. A farmer walks home. The field behind him is green. A small wagon moves along the road. Birds are settling into the trees. Smoke rises from chimneys. A bell rings in the distance. Inside a house, someone is preparing dinner. Children are talking. An older person sits quietly near the fire. Perhaps that older person remembers the war. Perhaps they remember a time when this same road was filled with soldiers. Now it is quiet. The older person listens. No horses. No marching. No shouting. Only ordinary evening sounds. And perhaps that is enough. The world after the 30 Years' War is not perfect. But it is alive. The fields are alive. The towns are alive. The families are alive. The markets are alive. The churches are alive. The roads are alive. And slowly, Europe begins to move forward. So let us rest here for a moment. 30 years of war have ended. A new political balance has appeared. The German lands remain divided. France and Sweden have gained influence. The Dutch Republic has secured its independence. The Habsburgs remain powerful. Religion remains important. And diplomacy has become more important than before. But the deepest change is perhaps something simpler. People can begin to imagine tomorrow. They can plan. They can build. They can hope. They can sleep. Take a slow breath. Let the old roads fade into the darkness. The armies are gone. The diplomats are home. The fields are quiet. The markets are opening again. And somewhere in a small village, a child is growing up who will never know what it was like to live through the 30 Years' War. For that child, the war will be a story. An old story. A story told beside the fire. A story about kings and soldiers. About Sweden and France. About the emperor. About battles. About treaties. But behind all those names are millions of ordinary lives. And perhaps that is what we should remember most. History is not only about the people whose names appear in large letters. It is also about the people whose names were never recorded. The farmer, the baker, the merchant, the mother, the child, the soldier, the traveler, the village priest, the craftsman, the woman waiting at the window, the family sitting beside the fire. They were the people who carried history through the difficult years. And when peace finally came, they were the ones who made life continue. The war ended on paper, but peace was built by people. One field, one house, one meal, one road, one family at a time. The night is now very still. The old European countryside is sleeping. The stars shine above the fields. The houses are dark. The roads are empty. And the long shadow of the 30 Years' War slowly fades into the distance. Let your mind rest there. No need to hurry. No need to remember every name. Simply remember the quiet road, the repaired house, the growing field, the family together, and the feeling of a world beginning again. Good night, and let the peaceful Europe after 1648 remain quiet until morning.